You've been told to hide your pain, to be strong, to move on, to smile when you're breaking inside. They said time would heal it, but it hasn't, has it? You still feel the ache, the tightness in your chest, the thoughts that won't stop spinning, the sadness that won't go away. No matter how busy you stay, no matter how hard you try. But what if the answer wasn't outside of you? What if peace wasn't in forgetting, but in finally understanding? For over 500 years, Buddhist wisdom has quietly held the key to healing, to peace, to freedom from suffering. Not through escaping emotions, but by sitting with them and seeing through them. By learning how to breathe with pain, not run from it. Tonight, that wisdom is yours. As you listen, something will shift. The noise in your mind will soften. The heaviness in your heart will start to lift. Not because the pain disappears, but because you'll stop fighting it. This isn't just another bedtime audio. This is a deep reset, a gentle unraveling of all the hurt you've carried too long. By the time you wake up, you'll feel lighter, clearer, more whole. Because real healing doesn't shout, it whispers. And it begins now. Are you ready to let go? Let's begin. You've made it here for a reason. Maybe the thoughts haven't stopped. Maybe your chest feels tight and heavy for reasons you can't explain. Maybe no matter how much sleep you get, you still wake up tired in your body, yes. But more than that, tired in your mind. The kind of tired that comes from thinking too much, feeling too much, carrying pain that never seems to go away. And now, in this quiet space where no one is asking anything of you, where no one is judging you, where you don't have to pretend or perform, you can finally rest. Not by escaping the pain, not by ignoring it, but by letting something deeper begin to heal. For over 500 years, the Satipatthana Sutta has offered a path for those who suffer silently, for those who overthink, for those who ache but don't know where to place the pain. And now, as your body settles, as your breath slows, that path is gently opening. Let it carry you inward, toward yourself. The mind doesn't repeat the same thoughts to hurt you. It does it to try and protect you from regret, from failure, from unexpected hurt. But what begins as protection quickly becomes a prison. That's the cycle of rumination. The same questions, the same fears, the same judgments swirling around like a storm that never clears. Why did this happen? What if I had done something different? Why do I still feel this way? The Satipatthana Sutta offers no judgment for these questions. Instead, it gently leads us back to what's real, what's happening now. It doesn't ask you to believe anything. It simply asks you to observe, not with force, not with shame, just to see what's here. And where does it begin? With the body. That is not an accident. The first foundation of mindfulness is the one we forget the most. The body is always honest. It doesn't overthink. It doesn't worry. It just is. When your thoughts are spinning and your emotions feel too big, the body is the first place to return. Feel your breath. Don't try to fix it. Just feel it. Notice the rise and fall. Feel where your body touches the surface beneath you. Notice the warmth, the stillness, the gravity pulling you toward the earth. In that noticing, you're already interrupting the loop. You're saying to your mind, I hear you, but I'm choosing to be here. And the more you come back to your body, the less control the thoughts have over you. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to explain yourself. You just return. Quietly, gently, again and again. When you begin to feel your body without judgment, something else begins to surface. Not just the structure of the body, but the sensations that move through it. This is the second foundation, feeling. In Buddhism, feeling doesn't mean emotions the way we usually think of them. It means the raw quality of experience. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? That's all. Nothing complicated. No stories. And that simplicity is powerful, because so often we add stories to sensations. A tight chest becomes anxiety. A headache becomes failure. A wave of sadness becomes a personal defect. But if we just stay with the raw sensation, if we say to ourselves, "This is unpleasant," instead of "This means I'm broken," something begins to soften. You start to see that pain doesn't have to become suffering. You don't have to push it away. You don't have to make it mean anything. You just feel it. You meet it like you would meet a guest in your home. And you breathe. Then comes the third foundation, the mind itself. Here, the practice goes deeper. You begin to observe the state of your mind, not what you're thinking, but how your mind feels. Is it restless? Is it dull? Is it scattered or focused? This may seem small, but it's everything. Because when you don't notice the state of your mind, you become it. If your mind is anxious, you feel like you are anxiety. But when you pause and say, "Ah, the mind is busy," you create space. And in that space, the identification loosens. You don't have to become your mental state. You can witness it, with curiosity, with care. This isn't a trick or a distraction. It's a way of remembering that mental states come and go. None of them are permanent. None of them are who you are. They're weather systems, not identity. And now, we arrive at the fourth foundation, dhammas. These are mental patterns, teachings, structures of experience. This is where the deepest insights come. Here, you begin to see what drives your rumination. Maybe it's craving, a wanting for things to be different, a longing to go back and change something, or to fast forward and escape the uncertainty of now. Maybe it's a varshuna pushing away of discomfort, or maybe it's just confusion feeling lost in the fog of thought. These aren't personal flaws. They're universal patterns. Everyone experiences them. And when you see them clearly, they lose their grip. The Buddha taught that by understanding these patterns not with analysis, but with presence, we can stop being pulled around by them. You notice the craving, and instead of chasing it, you feel what it does in your body. You notice the aversion, and instead of tightening, you soften. You notice the confusion, and instead of resisting, you breathe through the fog. And just like that, you're back in the body, back with feeling, back in presence. This isn't about solving your thoughts. It's about seeing them clearly and choosing to stay grounded in what's real. The most powerful part of this practice is that it doesn't ask you to escape anything. It invites you to stay, not to suffer, but to know the nature of suffering so deeply that it begins to transform. Rumination thrives in resistance. It feeds on trying to fix the past or predict the future. But mindfulness lives only in one place, the present. And when you return to this breath, this moment, you're stepping out of the loop. You don't have to stop the thoughts. You don't have to force peace. You just watch. You feel. You breathe. Again and again. And each time you do, the cycle weakens. The habits lose energy. Not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them. Awareness is what breaks the loop. Gentle, quiet awareness that sees clearly and reacts less. This is not a quick fix. It's a slow, deep shift. A retraining of how you meet yourself. And over time, something extraordinary happens. You begin to trust presence more than thought. You begin to choose grounding over spiraling. And that choice, repeated again and again, changes everything. You'll still have thoughts. You'll still feel things. But now, you'll meet them differently. You'll say, "I see you," and you'll breathe. And instead of being pulled in, you'll stay steady. That steadiness isn't cold. It isn't detached. It's wise. It's kind. It's a kind of strength no one can take from you, not even your own mind. That's what the Satipatthana Sutta offers, not a system of belief, but a way of seeing, a way of living, a way of coming home to what is real and letting go of what no longer serves. And as you rest now, as the teachings settle deeper into your body, you don't have to do anything more. Just let the practice work through you. Let the breath be your guide. Let your body be your anchor. Let awareness be your refuge. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're simply waking up to the truth that's always been here. And as that truth settles into your bones, the loop begins to quiet. The storm begins to clear. And beneath it all, there is space, there is breath, there is you, and that is enough. And as the breath deepens and the noise of thought becomes quieter, a new kind of space opens soon that's not just about being present, but about how you are present. You've learned how to return, how to interrupt the mental loop, how to observe without being consumed. But even as awareness grows, there's often something deeper that lingers quietly beneath the surface. It's not just pain, it's the judgment of pain. The voice that says, "It's my fault I feel this way." The thought that whispers, "I should be over this by now." The heaviness that doesn't come from what happened, but from what you've told yourself about what happened. This is where many get stuck, not in the moment, but in a long-standing, quiet war with themselves. And now, it's time to meet that layer directly. There is a practice that holds the heart like sunlight holds a cold body. It is gentle but not weak, simple but not shallow. It doesn't rush or force or try to fix. It simply includes. It includes the parts you like and the ones you've pushed away. It's called metta-loving kindness. And when turned inward, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for dissolving shame, softening harshness, and making space for forgiveness, not just as a thought, but as a felt truth. Self-forgiveness isn't a mental exercise. It doesn't come from convincing yourself you're worthy. It doesn't come from ignoring mistakes or pretending you never struggled. It starts with contact. Direct contact with the part of you that hurts. Not because you're weak, but because you're still holding on to stories of failure, blame, and regret. Stories you've carried for years. Stories that once tried to protect you, but now keep you from healing. Metta Bhavana gently unwraps those layers, not by arguing with them, but by meeting them with care. The practice begins not with thoughts, but with willingness. The willingness to stop avoiding yourself, to sit with the part of you that feels unworthy, not with criticism, but with warmth. Not with judgment, but with softness. You start by repeating phrases not to control your feelings, but to shape your relationship with them. Phrases like, "May I be kind to myself," or "May I be free from the weight of self-judgment." You don't have to believe them at first. You only need to say them, to offer them like seeds into the soil of your own heart. Each phrase is a gesture, a quiet bow toward your own humanity, a reminder that even the parts of you you've hidden are still worthy of love, not because they're fixed. Not because you've done something to deserve it, but because you exist. That's enough. You might notice resistance. The mind may say, "But I don't deserve this," or "This is pointless." That resistance is part of the process. It's not a sign to stop. It's a sign you're getting close to something real. You meet the resistance, too, with loving kindness. You don't push it away. You say, "May even this part of me feel understood." What begins to change isn't just how you feel, it's how you hold what you feel. Instead of carrying pain like a burden, you hold it like a small, trembling child, not to indulge it, not to wallow, but to care for it so it doesn't have to scream to be seen. Most self-judgment is a cry for attention, for acknowledgement, for safety. When you respond with kindness, the cry softens. The need to keep proving, defending, punishing begins to dissolve. And forgiveness unfolds not as a moment, but as a series of quiet choices. The choice to say yes to your own worth, The choice to stop measuring yourself against an invisible standard. The choice to accept that being human is messy and still sacred. Loving kindness directed inward also begins to shift your nervous system. It slows down the internal fight-flight response that gets triggered every time you remember a mistake or feel ashamed. It tells your body, you're not in danger anymore. And the body listens. Shoulders drop, breathing deepens, muscles unclench. Not because everything is fixed, but because you've made contact with something deeper than the wound, your own inner refuge. In practicing metta for self-forgiveness, you learn to be a home for yourself. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough. You stop outsourcing your worth to other people's approval. You start recognizing your own capacity to offer what you've always needed: acceptance. Not the kind that says everything is fine, but the kind that says you're still lovable, even in this. You also begin to see how much energy has been spent in self-attack, how often your inner voice criticizes rather than supports. You see how that voice was shaped not by truth, but by fear, by old conditioning, by misunderstanding. And once you see it clearly, you no longer have to believe it. You can respond instead with care. That response rewires the brain. It builds new pathway zones that choose compassion over punishment, understanding over blame. The practice isn't passive. It's a deep, intentional retraining of how you relate to yourself, and it shows up in unexpected places. In how you talk to yourself when you forget something, in how you respond when you feel overwhelmed, in how you breathe through a wave of sadness without making it mean you're broken. Loving kindness directed inward doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you stop growing from fear. You grow from support instead. You become your own ally. Not by pretending to have it all together, but by staying close to yourself when you don't. There is no part of you that doesn't deserve to be seen. No memory too painful, no regret too old, no mistake too deep. Every part of you that hurts is asking to be met with care, not fixed, met. Metta Bhavana offers you a language for that care, a rhythm for it, a structure that, when practiced with sincerity, begins to melt even the oldest walls. You may begin to notice moments where kindness arises naturally, where you catch a harsh thought and replace it with a breath, where you feel tenderness instead of shame, where you offer yourself silence instead of scolding. These are signs of healing, subtle but powerful. They grow, not by force, but by gentle repetition. The practice also reveals where your compassion has limits, where you still withhold love from parts of yourself. Not to shame you, but to invite you to open further. To say, even here, I will offer kindness, especially here. This is not about pretending everything is okay. It's about relating to what's not okay with a heart that doesn't close. That is what dismantles shame. That is what dissolves unworthiness. Not clever thoughts, not external validation, but your own willingness to stay, to care, to love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. There is a strength in this practice that goes unnoticed by the world, a quiet, unshakable power that comes from no longer turning against yourself, from choosing, moment by moment, to speak to yourself like someone you care about. That is the essence of self-forgiveness. You no longer demand perfection to offer love. You no longer wait for all the pain to go away to feel worthy. You stop chasing wholeness and start realizing it was never missing. That it's here, now, underneath the layers. Metta peels those layers back, gently, over time. And what remains is you. Not the wounded version, not the perfect version, just the honest human being who breathes, who tries, who hurts, who hopes, and who, through this practice, begins to remember something ancient and true. You are not the story of what went wrong. You are the capacity to love through it. Let the words continue, even when it's hard, especially then. Let the breath be your anchor. Let the phrases be your compass. Let the heart soften slowly. This is the work, not to become someone else, but to return again and again to the parts of you that were never broken, only waiting to be seen. And if you forget, if the harsh voice returns, if the pain rises again, you start over. That's the beauty of this path. It never runs out of second chances. Every breath is a new beginning. Every phrase, a new offering. Every time you stay, you heal a little more. Not with noise, with presence, with kindness, with the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself. In this space, you don't have to hide. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify your softness. You just have to be here, to breathe, to let the heart open, one small moment at a time. You're allowed to be whole, even in pain. You're allowed to be loved, even in pieces. And now, through this practice, you're learning how to love yourself there. Completely, freely, gently. And that, right now, is more than enough. The more you return to kindness, the more you start to see something unexpected beneath all the self-blame, beneath every harsh memory and every apology you whispered in your own mind. There's something deeper holding it all. A quiet identity built on wounds. The one who failed, the one who wasn't enough, the one who should have known better. That identity clings to every mistake, every loss, every time life didn't go as planned. And yet, what if the pain doesn't come from the event itself, but from the belief in a solid you that it happened to? What if the suffering stays alive because the mind keeps trying to protect a self that doesn't really exist in the way we think it does? This isn't about philosophy. It's not about thinking differently just for the sake of it. This is about freedom. Because once you begin to see clearly how the idea of a fixed identity creates emotional pain, everything changes, not all at once, but steadily, with each moment of insight. Anattanand self isn't about denying your experience. It's about understanding it from a place that isn't so tight, so personal, so permanent. And that understanding begins right here. From the moment we're young, we begin to build a sense of self. It's shaped by words spoken to us, roles we were given, things we did right, things we did wrong. Over time, it becomes a story. I'm this kind of person. I don't deserve that. I'm always the one who gets left. I mess everything up. The mind doesn't create this story to hurt us. It creates it to make sense of things. But that story gets mistaken for truth. And we forget something vital, that these are only thoughts. That this self we protect and mourn and judge is not a fixed object. It's a moving, changing process. It isn't who we are. It's what we've constructed out of memories, reactions, and expectations. And when something painful happens, that false structure tightens. It says, "This happened to me. They hurt me. Life broke me." The emotions may be real. The event may have happened. But the story that you are permanently wounded, fundamentally wrong, or forever damaged, this is where the suffering deepens. The idea of self personalizes every wound, magnifies every regret, and attaches identity to things that were never meant to define you. Through the lens of anatta, the self is not an object to be found. It's a habit to be understood. It's not that you don't exist at all. It's that you don't exist the way the mind believes you do, as a single, unchanging, solid thing. And once that grip loosens, pain doesn't have the same weight. You can still feel hurt without being trapped in the belief that you are the hurt. This is why the Buddha pointed so often to the 5 aggregates form: feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, not as parts of a true self, but as a way to see how what we call me is actually a flow, a pattern, a process unfolding moment by moment. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. You're not even the same person you were yesterday. And yet, the mind clings to a fixed image, This is who I am. This is what I deserve. This is how people treat me. That clinging is suffering. Letting go is liberation. You start to notice how tightly identity wraps around emotion. Anger becomes my anger. Shame becomes my weakness. Loss becomes my failure. But if you really look at anger, just the sensation, just the thought it arises, it stays, it fades. The same with sadness, with fear, with guilt. They are movements. They are events in awareness. They are not you. The only reason they last so long is because the mind wraps them in a story and says, "This is who I am now." What happens when you stop doing that? What happens when you simply feel what's here without adding the weight of identity? The answer isn't conceptual, it's direct. The pain becomes lighter. There is space around it. There is movement again. The stuckness softens. You start to see emotions not as attacks on your worth, but as weather patterns moving through the sky of awareness. And you are not the weather, you are the sky. This isn't disconnection, it's deeper intimacy. You don't stop feeling. You feel more honestly, more clearly, because now there's no need to protect a fragile ego. You don't need to spin stories to maintain a version of yourself. You can meet what's true with gentleness. You can say, this is sadness, instead of, why am I always this broken person? And that changes everything. In the beginning, the mind will resist. It will say, but of course I'm me. Of course I'm the one who was hurt. That voice isn't wrong, it's just used to living in a world of stories. It's used to organizing everything around a center. But if you pay close attention, you won't find that center. You'll find sensations, thoughts, moods, sensations again. They come and go. They don't point to a solid self. They point to change, to flow. And that flow is safe. You don't need to freeze anything into identity to feel real. You are already real. You are awareness itself. Even thoughts like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never heal, when you slow down, you'll see these are just sounds in the mind. They come with a sensation, a memory perhaps, but they aren't truths. They are movements. And when you see them as movements, you don't have to argue with them or believe them. You can let them pass like leaves on a stream. No clinging, no fighting, just presence. This loosening doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care without turning pain into a lifelong sentence. You care without turning experience into identity. You can hold sorrow without becoming sorrow. You can feel rejection without becoming the rejected one. You can grieve without becoming someone who is only grief. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with this. A quiet, steady strength. Not because you've risen above pain, but because you've stopped being consumed by the idea that pain defines who you are. There's no need to keep replaying old scenes, because there's no solid self to protect anymore. You're just here, breathing, watching, letting things rise and fall. And the falling becomes easier, because you're not holding on so tightly. You don't have to carry the weight of who you think you're supposed to be. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to be anyone special. You're allowed to just be. And that's where real healing begins. There is freedom in seeing that nothing about you is fixed. Not your past, not your mistakes, not even the pain you thought would never leave. Everything is changing. And when you stop resisting that change, you begin to flow with it. You begin to trust life again. Not because it always gives you what you want, but because you are no longer trapped in defending a self that doesn't need defending. You'll still feel, you'll still respond, but you'll know that these responses don't need to become identity. They don't need to define your value. They don't need to become your story. You'll see clearly that every experience is just Thetan experience. And you, the one who observes, remains open, fluid, untouched. This is not about detachment. It's about intimacy without fear, about seeing life clearly without getting caught, about letting your heart break open without believing that makes you less. You are not your roles. You are not your trauma. You are not even your healing. You are what's left when all of that falls away: presence, awareness, openness. This understanding does not come from thinking harder. It comes from watching gently, over and over. Watching the way identity forms around pain. Watching the way thought tries to solidify what is always moving. And then choosing not to follow, choosing instead to remain right here, present with what is. In that presence, things shift. You see the urge to personalize everything begin to weaken. You feel less need to defend yourself, less need to explain, less need to be anything other than awake. This is the freedom that the Buddha pointed to not in some future life, but here, now, in the recognition that there is nothing to hold on to, and in that nothing, there is peace. This is not an idea to accept, it is a truth to feel. In your breath, in your body, in the quiet spaces between thoughts. Rest there now. Let the illusion of self soften. Let the weight you've carried for so long drop gently to the ground. You are not what happened to you. You are not the one who failed. You are the one who sees. And that seeing is your freedom. Always was. Always will be. The illusion of a fixed self begins to soften when you stop gripping every emotion as a reflection of identity. That softening opens the way for something even more honest, the raw fact that life can hurt. Not because you've failed, not because something is wrong with you, but because pain is part of being alive. And the mind, even when it begins to see through the illusion of self, still has one more habito: turn away from pain, to avoid, deny, numb, or fight it. But healing does not begin with escape. It begins with acknowledgement, with turning fully toward what hurts, not to fix it, but to finally stop running. This is where the first noble truth begins. Dukkha, a word often translated as suffering, but deeper than just emotional pain. It speaks to a subtle dissatisfaction that runs through existence itself. A friction, a weariness, a sense that things never quite feel secure or lasting. And instead of pretending it's not there, the Buddha began his teachings by naming it. He didn't say life was meant to be pure joy. He didn't offer false promises. He offered truth, and in doing so, he offered freedom. The first truth is not a pessimistic statement. It's not meant to bring despair. It's an invitation into honesty, to say, yes, there is suffering, there is loss, there is aging, there is uncertainty, there is grief. These are not signs of failure. They are part of the package of life. And the moment you stop treating them as enemies, you stop making them worse. Resistance amplifies suffering. Avoidance makes pain grow louder, but turning toward it not with drama, not with panic, but with clarity is the first act of peace. That turning is subtle. It's not a dramatic moment. It's the quiet decision to sit with discomfort without needing it to go away. It's saying, this hurts, without adding, and that means I'm broken. It's noticing fear without needing to control the outcome. It's being present with what the heart is holding, even if it's heavy. And in that presence, something changes. Pain is still there, but it no longer owns you. It no longer defines your reality. It becomes something that can be met, felt, understood, not something you have to fight or hide from. This kind of honesty requires courage, not the kind that pushes through, the kind that stays still, that listens, that allows space for what's real, even when what's real is uncomfortable. And in that space you begin to notice, pain is not constant. It has texture, it has movement, it rises, it pulses, it quiets. You begin to feel the difference between pain and the story about the pain. The pain may be sharp, but the story says it will never end. The pain may feel lonely, but the story says it means no one cares. And once you see the story clearly, you're no longer trapped inside it. Turning towards suffering also reveals its universality. The mind often says, "Why me?" But when you stay present, you begin to see, this isn't just your burden, it's the human condition. Everyone hurts. Everyone carries something. There is nothing shameful about that. There is nothing personal in the fact of dukkha. It's not a punishment. It's not proof of inadequacy. It's simply what happens when life is impermanent, when bodies change, when hearts love and lose. And knowing that brings compassion not just for yourself, but for others. You begin to soften, not just toward your own pain, but toward the pain you see in strangers, in friends, in those you never understood before. The First Noble Truth also shows you how much time is lost in avoiding what can't be avoided. How much energy is spent trying to control things that are naturally out of your hands. When you stop fighting the truth of suffering, you free up that energy. It's no longer used to hold the armor in place. It becomes available for healing, for presence, for understanding. You no longer have to live in fear of what might hurt. You've already met it, and it hasn't destroyed you. This is why acknowledgement is so powerful. It's not passive, it's active. It's saying, yes, this is here. That yes creates room. It creates air where there was suffocation. It allows the nervous system to settle, to say, I don't have to keep running, I can be with this. And that being with isn't about tolerance, it's about relationship. You begin to relate to your pain in a new way, less like a threat, more like a message, less like an enemy, more like a visitor. That visitor may bring grief, or fear, or disappointment. But when you meet it with mindfulness, you're not overwhelmed. You feel it, but you're not drowning. You sense that what hurts is also what connects you to life. That suffering, when faced directly, becomes a doorway, not a wall. A doorway into depth, into empathy, into freedom from pretending. You no longer have to perform wellness. You can live with honesty. This doesn't mean pain becomes pleasant. It doesn't mean suffering disappears overnight. It means you stop layering extra tension on top of what's already difficult. You stop saying, this shouldn't be happening. You say instead, this is part of it. And from there, you move with more clarity, more care. You take steps not out of panic, but out of understanding. And those steps create less harm. They create more peace. Because they begin from a place of truth, not illusion. You begin to see that the effort to escape suffering often creates more suffering. Numbing leads to disconnection. Denial leads to confusion. But clarity, even when painful, leads to wisdom. The Buddha never said suffering was the end of the story. But he made sure it was the beginning. Because without that beginning, without facing what is you, can't know what healing really means. So you start here, with what is, with the ache in your chest, the thought that won't leave, the silence that feels sharp. You don't rush past it. You stay, you breathe. You acknowledge it fully, and in doing so, you stop being a victim of pain. You become a participant in your own awakening. This is the heart of the path, not pushing feelings away, not pretending to be above it all, but turning toward what's real, with eyes wide open, with tenderness, with resolve. Because only when you stop turning away can you truly begin to heal. The First Noble Truth doesn't demand that you like suffering, it asks only that you see it, that you stop covering it with distractions and defense mechanisms, that you let it be known. Because what is fully known loses its grip. It no longer hides in the corners of your mind, shaping your behavior without your consent. It becomes seen, and in being seen, it becomes workable. You don't have to carry it alone, you don't have to fix it in one breath. You only have to be with it long enough to know it. And in that knowing you remember, suffering isn't the opposite of peace. Denial is. peace is what rises when resistance ends, when the heart stays open, even to what it doesn't want. You might notice that the more you allow yourself to feel what hurts, the less sharp it becomes, not because it's gone, but because it's held with care, because there's space around it, because it's no longer hidden in shame. The more you turn toward it, the more you realize you can survive it. You already are. And that quiet survival is not weakness. It's a kind of strength the world rarely celebrates, but the path honors it deeply. There is wisdom in your body. It knows how to feel without collapsing. There is wisdom in your awareness. It knows how to stay without clinging. Trust that. Let that trust grow with each breath. Let the truth of dukkha be not a weight, but a guide. It shows you where to soften, where to let go, where to begin again. This is how peace is made, not in the absence of pain, but in the willingness to stop fighting it, in the willingness to sit with it, breathe with it, walk with it, until it teaches you what it came to teach. And it always comes with a lesson not in words, but in presence, in depth, in the slow, steady transformation that begins the moment you stop pretending everything is okay and start living in the full truth of what is. Let that truth hold you now. Let it be a place of refuge, not fear. You don't need to hide from what hurts. You only need to meet it with eyes that no longer look away. That's where healing begins, and it's already begun. When the struggle to deny pain ends, what rises in its place is not emptiness. It's something quieter, something more grounded, a steadiness that doesn't depend on life being easy or feelings being pleasant. After turning towards suffering, not resisting, not running, what's left is the space to stand inside experience without being broken by it. But this space isn't numbness, it's not disconnect. It's a quality far more profound, something the Buddha called upekkha, equanimity. And it holds the potential to shift how we meet every emotion, not by pushing it down, but by holding it in a way that transforms reaction into understanding. Equanimity is often misunderstood. It's not coldness. It's not detachment from life. It's not pretending not to feel. It is full presence with what is without grasping, without resisting, without clinging to outcome. It's standing in the middle of joy and sorrow, praise and blame, gain and loss, and not being torn apart by either side. It's the ability to remain open while not being overwhelmed, to care deeply while not losing yourself in the weight of caring. This balance is not natural for most. The heart tends to swing. When pleasure comes, the mind clings. When pain arrives, it contracts. This tug-of-war leads to constant agitation. But equanimity is the quiet strength that knows how to let things be, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. It sees clearly that everything, every feeling, every thought, every moment is moving. And because it's moving, you don't need to grip it. You can feel fully without falling in. To develop equanimity, you begin where you are. You observe how the mind reacts. You watch how it wants to chase comfort and avoid discomfort. You don't judge that. You simply notice it. You see how tightly the body holds when things feel unfair or uncertain. You recognize the stories that rise when emotions are strong, and instead of pushing them down, you breathe into them. You give them space. Not to indulge, not to analyze, just to allow. In that allowing, balance is born. Because when you're no longer fighting or feeding emotion, you're simply with it. You're not drowning in anger. You're aware that anger has arisen. You're not lost in fear. You're holding space for fear to be felt. That awareness is not passive. It's what allows you to act without being driven by reactivity. Equanimity gives you choice, not by controlling your emotions, but by not being controlled by them. It also teaches you that everything passes. This is not just a comforting phrase. It's a deep truth that equanimity makes real. The mind says things will never change. that the discomfort you feel now will last forever. But equanimity sees the impermanence in all things. It notices the subtle shift from heavy to light, from intense to soft, from stuck to open. When you trust impermanence, you don't need to panic when feelings rise. You know they won't stay. You can stay steady as they pass through. This steadiness doesn't make you less human. It makes you more fully present. Because now you're not reacting to every emotional wave as if it's a threat. You're not being pulled in 10 directions by things outside your control. You're rooted. That root is not indifference. It's love made wise, compassion made stable, awareness made strong enough to hold whatever life brings without collapsing under its weight. Equanimity also shows up in relationships. When someone praises you, you don't get inflated. When they blame you, you don't shrink. You remain grounded in your own inner knowing, not arrogant, not defensive, just steady. You're not seeking validation from every interaction. You're not trying to win or avoid judgment. You're listening with clarity, speaking with care, and staying rooted in what you know to be true. That calm becomes a refuge for others. People feel it. They feel safer around someone who doesn't overreact, who doesn't need to be right, who can stay soft in the face of intensity. In emotional storms, equanimity becomes your shelter, not by hiding from the rain, but by standing in it without being washed away. It's the quiet voice inside that says, "This too will pass." And even when it doesn't pass quickly, it says, "I can meet this without losing myself." That's real power, not force, not control, but presence that can endure. Training in equanimity doesn't mean you stop feeling joy or sorrow. It means you stop grasping at one and resisting the other. You start meeting both with the same open attention. Joy comes, and you smile, but you don't cling. Sorrow comes, and you breathe, but you don't collapse. The mind may still try to hold on. The heart may still want certainty. But with practice, you notice those movements without being caught in them. This noticing becomes your teacher. You learn to stay with discomfort longer, not to suffer more, but to suffer less by not flinching. You learn to pause when something beautiful happens, not to make it last forever, but to be fully there while it's here. You learn to stay connected in the face of others' pain, not by carrying their suffering as your own, but by holding space without drowning in it. Equanimity also brings deep freedom in letting go. The mind loves to replay events, to hold grudges, to keep the past alive as proof that something went wrong. But equanimity sees that holding on to what already ended only continues suffering. It lets go not out of apathy, but out of understanding. You don't need to keep grasping a pain just to prove that it mattered. You can honor it, learn from it, and still release it. Letting go is not forgetting. It's not denial. It's a gentle decision to stop carrying what can't be changed, to stop gripping what's already moved. This kind of release is only possible when you trust that you can face life as it is, without needing it to be different in order to be okay. That's the wisdom of balance. Equanimity also connects to the body. You start to feel how emotions affect your breath, your muscles, your posture. You begin to notice tension rising before your mind even names the emotion. And in noticing, you soften. You breathe more slowly. You open your hands. You respond to the body's signals with care instead of ignoring them. That physical balance supports emotional steadiness. You're no longer bracing against the world. You're flowing with it. In moments of deep uncertainty, equanimity becomes a compass. When the mind doesn't know what will happen, when the future is unclear, it offers calm. Not by giving answers, but by reminding you that you don't need certainty to be present. You don't need guarantees to take the next step. You only need to stay with what's here and respond with clarity. This doesn't mean every situation becomes easy, but your relationship with difficulty changes. You stop asking life to be fair and start asking how to meet life fairly. You stop demanding comfort and start building resilience. And that resilience isn't harsh or rigid. It's fluid. It bends without breaking. It listens without needing to fix. Equanimity also teaches humility. You begin to see that you can't control everything, not how others think, not what the world does, not even your own emotions, but you can choose how to meet what arises. You can choose to stay open, you can choose not to shut down, and in that choice, you find a freedom that control could never give you. This freedom also deepens your spiritual path. You no longer chase blissful states or try to avoid hard ones. You become interested in truth, what's real, what's present, what's arising now. That curiosity keeps you grounded, it keeps you honest, and it keeps you awake in the moments when the mind would rather turn away. Equanimity doesn't ask you to be perfect. It invites you to be real, to feel what you feel, to stay with what's hard, to love without losing yourself, and to trust that in the middle of it all, there's a place inside you that can hold everything without being overwhelmed. That place isn't a fantasy. It's not a special gift. It's a quality you already have. You're practicing it every time you pause before reacting, every time you breathe through discomfort, every time you care deeply without collapsing. That is equanimity. That is emotional liberation. And it's not far away. It's here, now, in this breath, in this body, in this moment you're living. Let yourself rest in it. Let it grow through practice. Let it hold you when things are stormy. Let it remind you that balance is not stillness without movement. It's movement without being thrown off center. You are not here to be untouched by life. You are here to meet it fully and to remain steady, not because everything is calm, but because you have learned to carry calm within you. Let that steadiness grow now. Let it shape how you move, how you feel, how you live. This is equanimity, not indifference. Deep presence, real strength, inner peace that holds everything and clings to nothing. The more you learn to remain balanced in the storm, the more you begin to notice how often the weight you carry isn't just the experience itself, it's the meaning you've attached to it. The weight of guilt, the burden of blame, the belief that somehow this pain is your fault, that something you did or didn't do caused everything to fall apart. And buried beneath those beliefs, there's often one idea quietly shaping it all: karma. But not the karma the Buddha taught. A distorted version. A version turned into fear, into shame, into emotional debt. Now is the time to see that clearly, because if you misunderstand karma, you may live your entire life trapped in stories that aren't even true. Stories that tell you suffering is punishment. That pain means failure, that your mistakes are being repaid by life itself. But that's not what karma is. And until you understand it deeply, it will keep feeding self-blame and locking you into a cycle of emotional heaviness. Karma, as the Buddha taught, is not a cosmic justice system. It's not a scoreboard. It's not personal revenge from the universe. It's simply the law of cause and effect. What you do, think, or say plants a seed. That seed, when the conditions are right, brings a result. It's not a judgment. It's not a moral sentence. It's just how things move. Just as fire burns and water flows, actions lead to outcomes. But those outcomes are not punishments. They're natural results. That difference changes everything. When you believe karma is punishment, you live with fear. You look at your pain and think, this is because I deserve it. You take every setback as a sign of your failure, every illness as retribution, every loss as proof that you've done something wrong. That interpretation doesn't bring wisdom, it brings shame. And shame doesn't lead to growth, it leads to hiding, to silence, to the tightening of the heart. But when you begin to understand karma as neutral, not moral, not emotional, just functional, you can begin to look at your life with clearer eyes. You stop seeing yourself as the problem and start seeing your actions, your choices, your habits as conditions that shape experience. And you realize you have power, not power to control everything, but power to choose what seeds you plant now. That's what the Buddha emphasized. Not you are suffering because you sinned, but you are always creating new causes, and with awareness, you can shift your direction. This turns guilt into responsibility. Not the heavy, self-hating kind of guilt, but the kind of ownership that says, I may not control the past, but I can respond to the present. This is a huge relief, because now you don't have to explain every difficulty with a theory of punishment. You don't have to look back and search for what you did wrong. You can meet each moment with clarity, asking, what am I creating now? It also brings compassion for yourself and others. Because when you understand karma as cause and effect, you see that people don't suffer because they're evil or bad. They suffer because they're caught in patterns. Patterns that come from fear, from ignorance, from pain passed down, not from some cosmic ledger of sins. And that means your own suffering too is not proof of your unworthiness. It's a chance to understand the pattern, and once you understand it, you can start to let it go. There is a kind of emotional cruelty that happens when karma is used as blame. When people are told, directly or subtly, that they attracted their pain, or created their illness, or caused their abuse. That kind of thinking is not only inaccurate, it's harmful. The Buddha never taught that all suffering is the result of personal past actions. He pointed to many causes: biology, environment, other people's actions, randomness. Karma is only one part, and it's not always traceable. Sometimes effects happen without a clear, linear cause. Life is complex. The human mind loves simple answers, but the truth is more layered. Understanding karma means respecting that complexity, not reducing it to blame. It also means releasing the obsession with fairness, the idea that everything must happen for a reason or that the universe owes us justice is not part of karma. Karma doesn't guarantee fairness. It guarantees patterns. Sometimes those patterns are interrupted by other forces. Sometimes they don't ripen in ways we expect. When you let go of the demand for perfect fairness, you stop being shocked by life's messiness. You start focusing on what you can do now, not what you think you should have been spared from. And this now is where karma truly lives. Not in your past, not in your imagined future, but in your present intention. Every word, every thought, every choice is a cause. Some of them are small, some are big. All of them shape what comes next. That's not a reason to fear every move you make. It's a call to wake up, to act from wisdom instead of habit, to plant seeds that bring peace, not more confusion. You can't undo every past cause, but you can stop feeding old patterns. You can notice when guilt rises and choose not to act from it. You can notice when fear shapes your decisions and come back to clarity. You can offer kindness even when you're hurting. That is how karma becomes a path to healing, not through punishment, but through presence. You may still feel regret. That's human. But with right understanding, regret becomes tender. It becomes a reminder of growth. It says, I see more clearly now. It doesn't say, I am terrible, and when others are caught in their own harmful patterns, this view of karma lets you hold their pain without judgment. You see their actions as causes. You see their behavior as conditioned. That doesn't excuse harm, but it explains it. It makes room for compassion and boundaries at the same time. Understanding karma also means letting go of perfectionism. You're not here to live a life of flawless causes and perfect effects. You're here to learn, and learning means mistakes. Every being on this path has planted seeds they regret. The point is not to be clean. The point is to be honest, aware, humble, willing to shift. This is what emotional healing requires. If you think pain is punishment, you'll avoid it. You'll shame yourself into silence. But if you see it as a messenger, a result of causes you can study, respond to, and outgrow, you'll begin to transform. Not instantly, not completely, but steadily, with every moment of mindfulness, with every small choice toward kindness. There's a deep relief in knowing that life isn't out to get you, that you are not being punished, that the universe is not holding a grudge. There's relief in knowing you are not the sum total of your worst decisions. You are not stuck. Every new intention is a new cause. Every new cause is a movement forward. This perspective allows you to look back on your life without collapsing into shame. You can see where things hurt and understand the patterns without needing to take it all personally. You begin to say, "This happened and it shaped me, but I'm not locked in it." That shift is quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks, but it is the start of freedom. You may still grieve. You may still wish things were different. But now that grief isn't poisoned with blame, it becomes clean. It becomes a form of love for your own humanity. And in that love, karma becomes your teacher, not your judge. This is the heart of it. Karma doesn't explain everything. It doesn't control everything. But it gives you something real to work with, not by looking for cosmic justice, but by living with clarity now. By planting seeds that reflect the peace you want to feel, by releasing the tight fist of guilt and allowing your life to unfold with care. Let that care begin now. Let it shape how you speak to yourself. Let it shape how you meet the past. Let it open the door to action, not from fear of consequence, but from the wish to end harm, inside and out. This is what karma really offers, not a reason to suffer, but a reason to pay attention. Not an excuse to punish, but an invitation to grow. When that's clear, the burden of guilt lightens. The need to find fault softens. And in its place, a new question rises: what am I cultivating right now? That question is freedom. That question is the start of everything. When you stop believing that life is punishing you and begin to understand your choices, conditions, and patterns as part of a natural unfolding, something unexpected opens up. You no longer hold on to your guilt like a sentence. You don't shrink under shame, and you don't chase meaning in every painful moment. But even with that clarity, strong emotions still come. Grief, anger, fear, confusion, they still show up, often uninvited, and still have the power to overwhelm. The question becomes, how do you meet these waves without being pulled under? How do you face them without turning them into a solid identity? For this, the Buddha offered something precise, practical, and often overlooked: the 5 aggregates. Not as abstract philosophy, but as a direct map for understanding the structure of experience and softening the hold that suffering can have over the heart. The 5 aggregates are not ideas to memorize, but tools to use. They describe the basic components of what we call the self: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are the building blocks of all experience. Everything you call me is made of these 5. And when you begin to observe them, not as fixed parts of identity, but as processes, as events, you start to see through the illusion of solidity that gives emotional pain its grip. Start with form. This is the body, physical sensation, breath, contact with the world through the senses. When you feel grief, or fear, or rage, it shows up in form first. A tightening in the chest, a heaviness in the limbs, a racing pulse. The mind says, "I am afraid," but the body says, "There is tightness here." That shift from identity to observation is the first movement toward freedom. You're not the fear, you are noticing the body's response. And in that noticing, the fear begins to loosen, not because it goes away, but because it's not feeding on the belief that it is you. Feeling comes next. In the teachings, this doesn't mean emotion in the way we use the word today. It means the raw flavor of experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. When anger arises, it feels unpleasant. When sadness comes, it's often mixed. There's ache, but also release. When a memory appears, it carries a flavor, a texture, a tone. Seeing that feeling is part of the process helps you avoid becoming entangled. You can say, "This is unpleasant," instead of, "This is unbearable," or worse, "This means I'm broken." The feeling is a signal, not a definition. And when you meet it with awareness instead of resistance, it begins to shift. Then there is perception. This is how the mind labels what is happening. A sound is labeled harsh. A look from someone is interpreted as disapproval. A sensation is named panic. Perception organizes experience into meaning, but perception is not neutral. It's shaped by memory, by bias, by mood, by history. When you're grieving, the sound of silence is interpreted as abandonment. When you're angry, a small gesture can seem like an attack. Understanding perception helps you question what you assume to be true. You begin to see that much of what you react to is not what's really happening, it's your filtered version of it. That realization breaks the spell. It lets you respond from the present, not from past wounds. Mental formations are the next aggregate. These include thoughts, emotions, habits of mind. They're the stories you tell yourself, the emotional reactions that arise without effort, the inner commentary that plays in the background. When you're hurting, this is where most of the suffering builds. A single painful thought can spin into a storm when it's wrapped in beliefs, judgments, and old narratives. But again, the moment you notice that these are formations, not facts, you begin to loosen their hold. "This is a thought arising," you say. "This is a story I've repeated many times." That recognition doesn't require you to stop the thought. It simply asks you to stop being fooled by it. You stop fusing with every mental movement. You start watching instead of reacting. And slowly, those formations lose their fuel. Finally, there is consciousness. This is the knowing, the awareness that experiences each moment. It is not something you create. It is what's already there, the open space in which everything else arises. Consciousness doesn't choose what appears. It simply knows. You begin to realize that you are not the content of experience. You are the space that holds it. The storm of anger, the wave of fear, the ache of sadness, all of it comes and goes within this open field of awareness. And that awareness, when cultivated, becomes your home, your center, the place where emotional pain can be held without being amplified. When you look at a painful emotion through the lens of the aggregates, something radical happens. You stop treating it as a solid thing. You stop saying, "I am anxious," and start observing. There is unpleasant feeling, tension in the body, thoughts about danger, and a knowing of all of this. In that observation, the emotion becomes workable. It's no longer a fixed enemy. It's a set of interdependent movements. Each part can be seen, and what is seen clearly is no longer in control. This process doesn't make pain go away, but it makes pain understandable. It gives you space to stay with it, to befriend it, to let it move through without turning into suffering. Because suffering is not the feeling itself, it's the clinging, the resistance, the identification. When those soften, what's left is just the raw truth of the moment. And that truth is always changing. You begin to recognize patterns. Maybe anger always comes with heat in the face, a flood of judgmental thoughts, a tightening in the gut. Maybe sadness brings heaviness in the chest, memories of past loss, and a perception of being alone. These patterns are not wrong, they are simply mechanical, like wind moving through trees. When you see them as processes, not personal failures, you relate to them differently. You stop fearing them, you stop fighting them, and that shift is what changes your life. The aggregates also help you see the impermanence of experience. You notice that feelings rise and fall, that thoughts come and go, that even the sense of self changes throughout the day. You feel strong one moment, small the next, confident in the morning, uncertain by night. There is no fixed identity holding it all together, only a stream of conditions. That stream is not a problem. It's a doorway, a chance to meet each moment with interest instead of fear. This understanding doesn't require analysis. It requires observation, direct contact. You sit with what's happening. You notice where it lives in the body, what tone it has, what thoughts it pulls in, what perception colors it. And all of that is held in awareness. You don't need to fix it. You just need to see it clearly. When you live this way, emotional pain becomes less mysterious. You stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start seeing, "Here is a moment of pain unfolding through these parts." And that shift from self-judgment to inquiry is what brings relief. Not because the emotions disappear, but because you no longer believe they define you. You also begin to feel more compassion for others, because you see that their pain, too, is a process, not a personality flaw, not a moral weakness, just aggregates moving through conditions. You stop taking things so personally. You see the patterns behind the words, the causes behind the reactions. And in that clarity, you find more room to respond with kindness, with understanding, with space. This framework does not require belief. It doesn't ask you to accept doctrine. It simply asks you to look, to pause, to feel, to notice how the self is not a thing but an event. How pain is not a punishment but a passing formation. How your job is not to fix yourself but to meet yourself as you are and watch, with quiet care, how even the hardest moments move. And they do move, even when they seem frozen, even when they've stayed a long time. With attention, they begin to shift, they open, they soften, not through force, but through being held in the light of your own awareness. This is the gift of the aggregates, not complexity, not philosophy, just the chance to meet each part of your experience with enough space to see its nature, and in seeing, you are no longer caught. You are no longer owned by the emotion. You are free to feel without becoming, free to respond without reacting, free to live with depth and honesty without needing everything to be smooth. That freedom may not be loud, it may not be dramatic, but it is real. It grows quietly, steadily, in every moment you choose to notice instead of fight, to observe instead of collapse, to let experience be what it is, without turning it into a prison. And that freedom, right now, is already beginning. Right here, in this breath, in this awareness, in this space where the heart can finally rest. Not because everything is easy, but because you are no longer treating your pain as a problem to solve. You are meeting it as a process to witness, and in that witnessing, peace becomes possible again. The more you learn to see pain as movement instead of identity, the more your inner world begins to shift. You no longer react to every emotion as if it defines you. You start observing, feeling, breathing, and space opens. But even with all this insight, there can still be noise. A subtle background current of thought, analysis, planning, rehearsing, remembering. Even the desire to heal can become a source of tension. And underneath it all is something often overlooked, the craving to keep explaining, to keep narrating your experience, to keep filling the silence. Yet true rest doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from the willingness to stop talking even to yourself. This is where noble silence becomes more than quiet. It becomes a doorway, not just to peace, but to emotional clarity so deep it cannot be reached through words. In the Buddhist tradition, silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without disturbance. It is the stopping of noise, not just external, but internal. It is the moment when the mind is no longer trying to fix, justify, interpret, or perform. It's not an absence. It's a presence that is vast, steady, and deeply alive. When you stop speaking both aloud and in thought, you begin to notice the subtle activity of your mind. How often it comments on everything, how quickly it jumps to conclusions, how it reaches for stories, arguments, identities, even in the stillness. And for many, that's when discomfort rises. The mind resists the quiet because it doesn't know how to rest in it. It feels unfamiliar. But if you stay, if you do not flee back into mental noise, something remarkable begins to unfold. Silence reveals. It brings to the surface what has been hidden, not through effort, but through non-interference. The emotions you've suppressed, the grief you haven't made time for, the subtle fears you've drowned in busyness, they rise, not to punish you, but because now, finally, there is space. You're no longer drowning them in distraction, you're letting them breathe. And in that breath, they begin to change. They become less threatening. You start to feel instead of explain. You start to know in ways words can't reach. This is not about force. Noble silence is not suppression. It is not trying to be quiet. It is the natural quiet that arises when there is no longer a need to escape what is. It's the stillness that grows when there is no agenda, when presence is enough, when the mind no longer needs to package reality into statements, but simply allows reality to be experienced directly. In silence, you also begin to see the gap between thought and awareness. You see thoughts arising, but you're no longer tangled in them. You no longer chase one after another. You don't need to finish every sentence in your mind. You don't need to solve the puzzle of your feelings. You just watch, and in that watching, thoughts lose urgency. You begin to trust that insight doesn't need to be forced. That understanding comes not through thinking harder, but through being more deeply present. There's a healing that happens when you're no longer talking to yourself about your pain. When you're not analyzing it or defending it or rehearsing the past, you're just being with it. That being with is what transforms, not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily, like water smoothing stone. Over time, you become softer, clearer, lighter, not because you've said the right things to yourself, but because you've stopped needing to say anything at all. In silence, you also rediscover your body. You begin to feel the rhythms of breath, the grounding of posture, the subtle tension in the jaw or belly. You return to the place where words have no entry, point the immediacy of sensation, and that return brings rest, not just physical but emotional. Because when the mind is quiet, the nervous system begins to settle, the inner alarms stop ringing. You realize that most of your exhaustion isn't from doing too much, it's from thinking too much. Even spiritual effort can become noise. Striving to be mindful, trying to let go, attempting to be better, these are all subtle forms of resistance. Silence cuts through that, not by achieving anything, but by offering nothing, and in that nothing, the heart breathes again. In monastic life, noble silence is not just a rule, it's a refuge. It's where monks and nuns learn to listen deeply not to others, but to themselves, to the patterns of the mind, to the truths that only arise in stillness. You don't need to live in a monastery to experience this. You only need to give yourself moments where you stop explaining, even in your head. Moments where you don't comment on your experience, you just experience. And that practice, though simple, is one of the most powerful forms of emotional release. Silence also teaches humility. Without the ability to speak or justify or prove, you're left with just what is. No story, no defense, just life as it unfolds. And in that simplicity, you see more clearly. You see that so much of what you've clung to has been propped up by words. The identity, the opinions, the wound-sore of it, narrated into being. When the narration stops, the weight begins to fall away. This does not mean you become passive. Silence does not take away your voice, it shows you when it's needed and when it isn't. You begin to speak less, but with more intention. You don't react to every thought or feeling. You listen. You wait. You let things settle. And from that settled place, your words become more honest, more compassionate, more true. Because they're no longer coming from habit, they're coming from clarity. In relationships, this changes everything. You stop needing to fill every space with talking. You start to listen more fully, without preparing your reply. You hold space for others, not by fixing them, but by being fully present. That presence is rare. It is what people remember, even if they don't know why. You become the one who listens without judging, who stays without interrupting. And in doing so, you become a source of quiet healing, not just for yourself, but for those around you. Silence also allows you to reconnect with mystery. In a world where everything must be named, labeled, categorized, silence reminds you that not everything needs to be understood. Some things only need to be felt. Some truths are too deep for language. Noble silence allows you to dwell in those depths, to rest in what cannot be spoken. And in that rest, the heart expands. You may notice that after long silence, even the smallest sound feels different. Even the simplest thought carries weight. Because silence recalibrates your sensitivity, it sharpens awareness. It makes the world vivid again, not because anything changed, but because you stopped dulling your perception with noise. This kind of silence is not always comfortable. At first, it can feel exposed. You may feel restless, agitated, uncertain, but these feelings are not obstacles. They are part of the process. They arise because silence removes the layers that kept them hidden. When you stay with them, without speaking, without explaining, they begin to teach you, not through logic, but through presence. You feel their texture, you feel their movement. You begin to understand not with the mind, but with the whole of your being. And in time, you stop fearing silence. You begin to crave it, not as an escape, but as a return to what is essential, to what is honest, to what is real. Let yourself settle now. Let the internal narration soften. There is nothing to explain, nothing to fix, just this breath, just this presence. Let it be enough. In noble silence, healing is not something you do. It is something you allow. It rises not through effort, but through surrender. Through not needing to be anyone, not needing to prove anything, not needing to understand everything, just being here, just being. Let this silence be your teacher. Let it show you what you've been running from. Let it reveal the peace that was always underneath the noise. Not because you finally figured it out, but because you finally stopped talking long enough to feel it. And now, in this space, without commentary, without judgment, rest. Let the stillness hold you. Let it wash over the parts of you that are tired of thinking, tired of speaking, tired of trying to hold it all together. Here, in the quiet, everything can finally soften. And what remains is not emptiness. It is the fullness of being. Silent, whole, awake. In silence, when the inner noise quiets, what rises is often not peace, but questions. Subtle, sharp, and deeply personal. Not loud doubts about the world, but quiet ones about yourself. You begin to wonder whether you're doing any of this right, whether you're even capable of healing, whether what you're practicing is working at all. And that moment, the moment when uncertainty appears, can either become a doorway to deeper understanding or a trap that keeps you stuck. What makes the difference is how you meet it. Doubt is not the enemy. It only becomes destructive when it's confused with something it is not. In the Buddhist path, there is a vital distinction between skillful doubt and the kind of self-doubt that paralyzes. Skillful doubt is a sign of intelligence. It's the questioning that keeps you honest. It pushes you to look more closely, to test, to examine, to not settle for blind belief. It doesn't destroy trust, it refines it. It doesn't close the path, it clears it of debris. But self-doubt, the kind shaped by insecurity and fear, doesn't seek understanding. It seeks certainty. It doesn't ask questions to learn. It asks questions to confirm the belief that you're not enough. To see the difference, you have to slow down and feel the energy behind the thought. When a question arises, does it open space or shrink it? Does it bring curiosity or anxiety? Does it make you want to explore or make you want to give up? The same words, "What if this isn't working?" can either be the start of a deeper investigation or a disguised form of giving up on yourself. It all depends on the tone, the intention, the awareness behind it. Skillful doubt moves with care. It doesn't jump to conclusions. It doesn't demand answers right away. It allows not knowing to be part of the path. It says, "I don't understand this yet," and that's okay. It holds space for complexity. It looks inward without tearing yourself down. It notices confusion and says, "Let's sit with this." That kind of doubt strengthens practice. It prevents complacency. It leads to direct experience, because it refuses to accept second-hand truth. It wants to know for itself. Destructive doubt, on the other hand, pretends to be insight but acts like sabotage. It whispers, "Why bother?" It feeds the narrative that you're not capable, not ready, not worthy. It doesn't investigate. It loops. It circles around the same fear, not to understand it, but to reinforce it. It wears the disguise of humility but is rooted in shame. And the longer it goes unrecognized, the more power it gains, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The way to work with doubt is not to get rid of it, but to examine it, not with aggression, but with clarity. Ask where it's coming from. Ask what it's protecting. Ask what it fears would happen if you moved forward anyway. You'll often find that destructive doubt is guarding old pain. It's trying to prevent failure or rejection or disappointment. And once you see that, you can meet it with compassion instead of resistance. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I don't need to stay stuck." Another sign of skillful doubt is that it stays rooted in the present. It questions what's happening now. It's precise. It's focused. It wants to see clearly. Destructive doubt is vague. It spirals into the future. It drags in the past. It fills your mind with generalizations. "I always do this. I never follow through. I can't trust myself." These are not inquiries. They are attacks. They don't deepen awareness. They shut it down. This distinction becomes especially important in meditation and spiritual life, because self-doubt often masquerades as spiritual humility. You might think you're being honest when you say, "I'm not progressing," or "others are ahead of me," but often these thoughts come from comparing, not from clarity, from judgment, not from presence. The path is not a race. It's not measured in milestones. It's measured in sincerity, in how fully you show up to each moment, even when it's confusing, especially when it's confusing. Some of the most profound insights arise only after long periods of doubt, because doubt forces you to go deeper. It prevents blind acceptance. It demands real contact with experience. That's why the Buddha never said, "Don't doubt." He said, "Know your doubt." He placed it on the list of hindrances, not to be hated, but to be understood. to be seen clearly enough that it no longer controls you. When doubt is met with awareness, it transforms. It becomes fuel for inquiry. It teaches you where you're still clinging to control, where you're still trying to guarantee success before you've even begun. It shows you your attachments to outcomes, to image, to progress. And once you see those attachments, you can let them go. Not all at once, but breath by breath, moment by moment. This process requires patience, because the mind wants resolution. It wants to move quickly from uncertainty to certainty. But spiritual growth is not linear, it's circular. It deepens through revisiting, through re-examining, through staying open to not knowing. Skillful doubt trusts that space of uncertainty. It doesn't rush to fill it. It lets the truth unfold in its own time. You may find that the more you allow for not knowing, the more insight arises. When the mind isn't busy proving or defending or denying, it becomes quiet enough to see clearly. And in that clarity, you begin to distinguish between the voice that questions out of wisdom and the voice that doubts out of fear. One helpful practice is to write your doubts down, not to fix them, but to externalize them, to see them on paper, to give them shape. Then ask, does this doubt invite me to look more deeply? Or does it shut me down? Does it come from curiosity or from self-judgment? That reflection alone can begin to shift the energy. You can also speak to your doubt like a companion, not to push it away, but to learn from it. Ask what it's trying to protect. Ask what it believes about you. Ask what it needs to feel safe. Often, what it needs is not certainty, it's permission. Permission to not have all the answers, permission to be new at something, permission to move forward even while uncertain. The fear beneath self-doubt is often about being wrong, about making a mistake, about being seen as incapable. But practice is not about avoiding mistakes. It's about being present enough to learn from them. Growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from willingness. Willingness to try, to fall, to try again with clearer eyes. In spiritual inquiry, it's healthy to doubt teachings until you've seen their truth for yourself. But that inquiry must come from stability, not insecurity. From presence, not panic. When you ask, is this true? Ask with the heart, not just the mind. Ask from stillness, not agitation. And stay long enough for the answer to resonate in words, but in felt understanding. There is also a cultural layer to self-doubt. Many are taught to minimize themselves, to stay small, to not trust their own experience. When these voices show up on the path, they sound like humility. But true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking clearly, seeing your limits and your strengths with honesty, holding both without judgment. That balance is what allows real growth. As you continue to walk this path, doubt will return. It's part of the process. Don't treat it as a failure. Treat it as a signal, a sign that something new is unfolding, a sign that you are moving beyond familiar ground. That movement may feel shaky, but it's where real transformation begins. Stay close to yourself in those moments. Keep breathing, keep observing, keep questioning, not with aggression, but with love. Let your doubt become your teacher, not the kind that scolds, but the kind that asks you to listen more deeply, to feel more fully, to trust what arises from silence, not from fear. Because in the end, the point is not to be free of doubt. It's to be free within doubt. To remain steady when certainty fades, to stay kind when the mind trembles. To keep walking, not because all your questions are answered, but because something deeper than fear is guiding you. And that something, call it wisdom, call it faith, call it the quiet knowing beneath the noise it grows, not when you silence your doubt, but when you meet it with open eyes and a steady heart. That is where the paralysis ends. That is where movement begins again. Gently, clearly, with care, with truth. with the part of you that never needed to be perfect to be whole. When you stop being afraid of not knowing, something deep begins to shift. You begin to trust the path, not because it gives you all the answers, but because it shows you how to remain steady even when clarity is not immediate. But as the heart opens and awareness grows, another challenge quietly appears: letting go, not of the path, not of the questions, but of the places you cling for false safety, the comfort of distraction, the illusion of control, the belief that you can avoid pain by staying inside what is familiar. But sometimes, the very thing that feels safe is what is keeping you from freedom. There's a story in the Lotus Sutra that speaks directly to this moment, the parable of the burning house. A father comes home to find his house on fire. His children are inside, still playing, unaware of the danger. He calls to them to run, but they don't listen. They're too attached to their toys, too caught up in their games. So he tells them what they want to hear, that outside there are carts filled with everything they love. Only then do they run. Only then do they leave the fire. This story is not about deception. It's about urgency. It's about compassion that meets people where they are, and the truth that sometimes you must outgrow your comforts in order to survive. The fire is the world of suffering, the pain of clinging to things that cannot last. The toys are the illusions we chase: status, praise, control, distraction. The house is what we call normal, but it's already burning. And the act of walking out, of letting go, is not easy, but it's necessary. Attachment is not just about things. It's about ideas, about roles, about identities that feel safe because they're familiar. It's about the hope that something outside you can finally make you feel whole. But when you slow down and look honestly, you begin to see that the comfort you've been holding on to is costing you peace, that the illusion of control is causing exhaustion, that the fear of letting go is keeping you inside a house that is no longer safe. Letting go is not about giving up. It's about seeing clearly, seeing that no external thing can give lasting happiness. That clinging to what must change will always lead to fear. That trying to keep everything in place is not strength, it's stress. And once you see this, the act of letting go becomes less about loss and more about return. You're not losing anything real. You're releasing what was never stable in the first place. But the mind resists. It says, "What will I be without this? How will I feel safe if I let this go? Who am I if I'm not holding everything together?" These are not bad questions. They are invitations. Invitations to feel the fear beneath the clinging, and to realize that the fear does not need to be followed. You don't need to argue with it. You don't need to prove it wrong. You just need to see that it is fear, not fact. And that seeing breaks the illusion. The path of letting go often begins in small ways. You notice where you're holding too tightly, trying to control how someone sees you, trying to fix every feeling before it arrives, trying to keep things from changing. You pause, you breathe, you don't force anything, you simply soften, and in that softening, something inside you begins to release. This is not an act of will. You can't force letting go. You can only see clearly enough that holding on no longer makes sense. That's what the parable shows. The children weren't forced out of the house. They left because their attention was redirected, because their mind shifted, because something more meaningful appeared. And in your life, letting go happens the same way, not always through effort, often through insight, through the quiet realization that peace matters more than being right, that presence matters more than protection, that truth matters more than comfort. One of the most painful things to let go of is the story of who you thought you'd be, the identity that's been built around your pain, the version of yourself that developed to survive, but now keeps you from living. Letting go of that story doesn't mean denying your past. It means not letting your past decide your future. It means seeing that what helped you then might be hurting you now. And that's not failure, that's growth. Letting go also means releasing the hope that things will always go the way you want, that people will behave the way you expect, that life will bend to your timeline. When that hope fades, there's grief. But beneath that grief is freedom, because now you are no longer measuring your peace against circumstances. You're no longer waiting for the world to cooperate before you allow yourself to rest. There's a kind of power that comes when you let go, not because you've given up, but because you've stopped resisting what already is. You're no longer using all your energy to hold up something that wants to fall. And when it falls, what's left is honesty, raw, open, simple truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need explaining, it just needs to be lived. Letting go is not just an idea, it's a practice. It shows up in the breath, in the body, in the heart. When you're angry, letting go is the moment you choose to feel instead of fight. When you're grieving, it's the moment you stop trying to speed it up. When you're anxious, it's the moment you let the fear be there without trying to talk your way out of it. These are the moments that change you, not because they look dramatic, but because they are honest. The parable of the burning house reminds us that staying where it's familiar can be deadly. That comfort can blind us to danger. That illusion can feel safe even when it's burning. But the truth is never found in the house. It's found outside, in the openness that follows release, in the clarity that follows loss, in the freedom that follows the choice to walk out, even if your legs are trembling. Sometimes you don't walk out with confidence. Sometimes you crawl. Sometimes you take one shaky step, then freeze. But every step counts. Every act of loosening brings you closer to peace. And once you're outside, you see how much space there really is, how much light, how much possibility. None of that was visible from inside the fire. Letting go also means letting others be who they are. It means releasing the need to change them before you can feel okay. It means understanding that their journey is not your responsibility, that your peace cannot depend on someone else's choices. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. You stop believing that your worth is tied to how others treat you, that your healing depends on their behavior. Letting go of that story is painful, but it's necessary, because the more you cling to how things should be, the harder it is to love what they are. You may find that as you let go, grief rises. This is normal. Letting go is a form of dying. Dying to the version of life you thought would make you whole. Dying to the expectations you carried like armor. That grief is not a mistake. It's part of the process. Feel it fully, but don't stop there. Beneath that grief is life, the kind that doesn't depend on perfection, the kind that doesn't need everything to go according to plan. As you practice letting go, you begin to see where you've been clinging out of habit, out of fear, out of the hope that holding tighter will bring stability. And you realize that freedom doesn't come from holding on. It comes from learning how to open, to trust the unknown, to walk into the next moment without dragging all of the past behind you. There's no need to rush. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a path. Some days you release with ease. Other days you return to old patterns. That's okay. What matters is your willingness to keep showing up, to keep seeing where you're still inside the burning house, to keep remembering that you don't have to stay. And when the urge to return arises, when the mind tells you that maybe the house wasn't so bad, pause, breathe. Remember the truth, remember the heat. Remember how much energy it took to survive in that space. And then take another step forward. Because each time you walk away from illusion, each time you choose truth over comfort, presence over control, reality over fantasy, you move closer to a life that doesn't just look good from the outside, but actually feels honest on the inside. And that's what this path is about. Not the avoidance of pain, not the performance of perfection, but the courage to let go of what is burning and walk step by step into the unknown, into the open, into the kind of peace that doesn't require you to hold on to anything at all. Letting go of what no longer serves is never about denying life, it's about making space for what's true. But even as you walk out of what's burning, the world doesn't suddenly become quiet. Life keeps moving, pulling you in all directions. One moment brings success, the next brings failure. One day, you're praised. The next, you're misunderstood. Pleasure lifts you, and soon after, pain returns. And through it all, there's the pull, the emotional weight of trying to hold on to the highs and avoid the lows. This constant push and pull has a name in the Buddhist teachings: the 8 worldly winds. They are not mistakes, they are not punishments, they are simply conditions every person meets. Gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disgrace, pleasure and pain. No one is immune to them. They rise and fall like weather, moving through every part of your life. The suffering begins when you try to live only for one half and reject the other. The mind craves gain, praise, fame, and pleasure. It fears loss, blame, disgrace, and pain. And that craving creates tension, because no matter how hard you try, you cannot freeze the winds. You can only learn how to stand in them without being thrown. This is emotional resilience, not the ability to control what comes, but the ability to remain balanced when it does. It starts by understanding that these winds are not personal. They don't target you because you did something wrong. They move through everyone. A promotion today doesn't mean you're better than yesterday. A harsh comment tomorrow doesn't mean you're worse. These movements are part of a larger rhythm, and once you see that, they lose their power to define you. Gain is one of the most seductive winds. It brings comfort, validation, and the illusion that you've arrived. But the danger is in attachment. The moment you start clinging to what you've gained, status, money, success, you begin to fear its loss. You start to protect it, control it, define yourself by it. And the more you hold, the more anxious you become. Because everything gained can be lost. The wise response to gain is gratitude without clinging. Enjoy what comes, but don't build your identity around it. Let it pass through your hands, not take root in your heart. Loss, its mirror, feels heavy. It can take your breath away. The end of a relationship, the failure of a project, the disappearance of stability. Loss brings grief, but it also brings clarity. It strips away illusion. It shows you what you've been depending on, and in that space of absence, there's a chance to see what's real. Loss hurts, but it also reveals what was never yours to control. It teaches you to hold lightly, to love fully without possession, to show up without expecting permanence. Praise is powerful. It feeds something deep in the mind, the longing to be seen, to be approved of, to be enough. But the danger is subtle. When praise becomes a source of identity, you start to need it. You shape yourself to receive it. You avoid truth to protect it. And eventually, you lose yourself in the performance. The wise heart hears praise, feels it, but doesn't rely on it. It asks, is this true? It listens inward more than outward. It values integrity over applause. Blame is sharp. It can trigger defensiveness or shame, but it too can be a teacher. It can show you your blind spots, or it can reflect someone else's projection. The key is discernment. Not to reject blame immediately, but to ask whether there's truth in it. To learn what you can without internalizing what doesn't belong to you. Blame hurts most when it touches a wound that's already there. Healing that wound makes you less reactive, more curious, more free. Fame is often mistaken for worth. It gives the illusion of mattering more. But like all winds, it's unstable. It can shift overnight. What makes you visible today might make you forgotten tomorrow. Chasing fame is exhausting. Because it depends on other people's attention. True value doesn't increase with recognition. It exists whether seen or not. When you stop needing to be noticed, your actions become more genuine. You serve because it's right, not because it's seen. Disgrace is its shadow. It brings humiliation, judgment, the fear of rejection. But often, it brings you closer to truth. It removes the mask. It shows you what it means to be misunderstood and how to stand inside that without collapsing. When you no longer fear disgrace, you become more honest, you live more freely. Because now, you're not shaping your life around how others see you. You're living in alignment with what matters. Pleasure is sweet, it softens the edges, but it's fleeting. When you chase it, you become dependent. The craving grows, and with it, the fear of discomfort. You start organizing your life around feeling good instead of living well. The practice is not to reject pleasure, but to enjoy it without grasping. To let it arise, enjoy its presence, and allow it to pass without clinging. When you do that, pleasure becomes a gift, not a chain. Pain is unavoidable, physical, emotional, mental. It visits every life. But when you meet pain without resistance, it becomes manageable, not pleasant, but meaningful. It humbles you. It opens your heart. It connects you to others. The fear of pain is often worse than the pain itself. When you stop running from it, you see that it changes, that it has layers, that it holds information. Pain, when allowed, becomes part of your wisdom. These 8 winds don't stop. They move through every phase of life. What changes is your relationship to them. You begin to see them as whether not reflections of your worth, but conditions to navigate. When gain comes, you bow. When loss comes, you breathe. When praise lifts you, you feel it fully without floating away. When blame cuts, you listen and stay grounded. When fame tempts, you remember your roots. When disgrace stings, you return to your truth. When pleasure smiles, you enjoy it. When pain cries, you hold it with kindness. Emotional resilience doesn't mean becoming numb. It means remaining whole in the middle of movement. It means staying soft when the world turns hard. It means returning again and again to center, not because the winds stop, but because you've learned to stand. This practice is not quick. It grows with each moment of awareness. Each time you pause before reacting. Each time you observe rather than obey the emotion. Each time you let a feeling pass without clinging. You become more stable, not because you've mastered control, but because you've let go of needing to control everything. The 8 worldly winds can be teachers or tormentors. What makes the difference is mindfulness. With mindfulness, you meet each wind as it is. You feel it fully. You don't personalize it. You respond with clarity. Without mindfulness, you are thrown from one to the next, praising yourself one day, blaming yourself the next, feeling high in gain, low in loss. The inner world becomes chaotic, ruled by whatever arises. But when you see the pattern, the game changes. You no longer need the world to agree with you for you to feel okay. You no longer need to chase every up and avoid every down. You can stand still. You can breathe. You can listen. You can choose. And that choice is everything. Let the winds come. Let them pass. Let your center remain clear, present, and open. Not because you've escaped life, but because you've learned how to live within it fully, honestly, and with a heart that cannot be swayed by every storm. That is the strength born not from resistance, but from understanding. And it is yours, always, in the stillness beneath the winds. When you stop chasing the highs and fearing the lows, when you no longer build your identity around praise or collapse beneath blame, something steadier begins to take root. You realize the world will keep changing, no matter what you do. Conditions will continue to shift, with or without your permission. This awareness can lead to peace, but it can also stir something deeper, because behind every rise and fall is the truth we rarely want to face. Everything we love will one day be gone. Everyone we hold dear will one day leave or be left. And the body you live in now is not permanent. It is moving toward its own end, even as you breathe. This is not morbid, it's real, and it's where true presence begins. The Buddha offered a clear mirror for this reality in what are called the 5 remembrances. These are not poetic verses. They are direct, unwavering truths about the human experience. Not meant to frighten, but to wake you up, to shift your relationship with time, with loss, with attachment, with how you live this one fragile life. The more clearly you see these truths, the more grief softens. Not because it disappears, but because it's no longer fought. It is no longer a mistake. It becomes part of love itself. The first remembrance is simple. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to avoid aging. You may try to distract yourself. You may chase youth, resist the signs. But the body changes. Joints ache. Memory shifts. Faces transform. The more you resist aging, the more you suffer. The more you deny it, the more fear creeps in when it starts to show. But when you accept this truth, when you sit with it without looking away, a kind of peace begins to grow. Aging becomes a teacher. It invites you to honor the present, not because it's perfect, but because it won't last. The second remembrance follows. I am of the nature to become ill. No matter how careful you are, sickness is part of this body. You can take care of your health, and that matters, but it's not protection from all harm. When illness comes, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. Understanding this allows you to meet pain with less fear, with more compassion. It helps you stay kind to yourself when your body needs care, and it helps you offer that same care to others when they suffer. Illness reminds you that vulnerability is part of the path, not a detour from it. The third is perhaps the hardest. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. The mind resists this more than anything else. It pretends there's always more time. It avoids the topic entirely. But death is not just a future event. It is already woven into this life. Every moment you live is one moment closer to the end. Every breath is a step toward your final one. This truth, when faced directly, has the power to cut through distraction. It makes your choices matter. It makes your presence deeper. You stop waiting for the right time to be present, to forgive, to rest, to love, because you know this time is all you're guaranteed. The fourth remembrance brings the truth closer to the heart. Everyone I love is of the nature to change and die. There is no way to avoid being separated from them. Love always carries loss. This isn't because love is wrong, it's because life is changing. Clinging to the idea that your relationships will stay the same only creates fear. But remembering impermanence doesn't make love weaker. It makes it more urgent, more honest, more tender. When you remember that nothing and no one is guaranteed, you start to show up more fully. You stop wasting moments in pride, in silence, in delay. You speak truth. You offer presence. You meet your relationships not with control, but with reverence. The fifth remembrance brings it all together. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of what I do. Everything else can be taken: health, status, possessions, even loved ones. But how you show up, what you say, how you treat others, this is what remains. This is what shapes your life. This is what echoes beyond you. In a world where everything changes, your actions become your legacy, not in a grand way, but in small, meaningful ways. A word spoken in kindness, a hand offered in silence, a choice made in integrity. These are the things that matter. When grief hits, these remembrances are not ideas to comfort you. They are truths to anchor you. They don't make the pain go away. They make it workable. You see that your sadness is part of loving. You see that your ache is proof that you cared. And you stop turning loss into a problem that needs solving. You let it be what it is: shard, sacred, human. Contemplating these truths regularly changes the way you relate to time. You stop putting your life on hold. You stop assuming you'll get to it later. You begin to see that this moment, right now, is the only one that asks for your full attention. Not the next one, not the one you missed. Just this one. You begin to say what you need to say. To forgive before it's too late. To pause in moments you'd usually rush through, because you know the chance may not come again. You also stop waiting for closure to move forward. Some losses will never make sense. Some goodbyes will never feel finished. But you learn that peace is not the same as understanding. Peace comes from softening into what is, from letting grief move through you without needing to control its shape. The 5 remembrances give you the ground to do that. They remind you that loss is not personal. It's not punishment. It's a shared condition, one that opens your heart to the full scope of being alive. Practicing with these reflections doesn't mean you live in fear. It means you live awake. It means you don't take time for granted. It means you learn to grieve without collapsing and to celebrate without clinging. It gives you the ability to hold joy and sorrow in the same breath, to meet the changing nature of life with less resistance, more grace. This awareness also teaches you how to stay present with others in their pain. You don't try to fix their grief. You don't offer shallow words. You sit with them. You breathe with them. You know what it means to lose, and because you've faced it in yourself, you can hold space for them without turning away. This is what presence really means, not just being there when things are bright, but staying steady when they grow dark. Over time, the remembrance of impermanence becomes not a source of sadness, but of clarity. You see through the illusion of forever, and because of that, you begin to live more fully. You savor the small things, the sound of someone's voice, the quiet between words, the way sunlight hits the floor. These details become sacred, not because they last, but because they don't. And in that fleeting beauty, you find real presence. Let this reflection stay close, not as a heavy thought, but as a gentle guide. Let it shape your actions, not with urgency, but with sincerity. Let it soften your heart toward yourself and others. Let it remind you that there is no need to wait to live the way you want to live. No need to wait to say what matters. No need to wait to begin again. In grief, these truths hold you. In joy, they ground you. In uncertainty, they stabilize you. You don't need to memorize them. You only need to feel their truth in your bones. To return to them when you forget. To let them whisper to you when you're afraid. And to allow their honesty to deepen your presence, again and again. There is no need to be afraid of this life passing. It's what makes everything matter. Let that awareness be your teacher. Let it help you heal, not by replacing loss, but by meeting it with truth. Let it open your eyes, your hands, your heart to the life you already have, and the love that's always been here, waiting for your full attention. When you stop turning away from loss and begin to live with a steady awareness of impermanence, something starts to soften within you. Life becomes more precious, and so does connection. You begin to see that nothing truly belongs to you, not time, not people, not even this body. And yet, even within that truth, you start to feel something deeper. The pain of separation is not the end of the story. Grief opens the heart, but loneliness can still settle in. You may sit in silence with full awareness of change and still feel a deep apathy sense that something is missing, that you are somehow alone in all this, but this too is a misunderstanding. A painful one, because at the heart of reality there is no such thing as being separate. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen teacher and peace activist, offered a radical yet deeply tender insight into this human struggle. He called it into being the understanding that nothing exists by itself. Everything is connected to everything else. A flower is not only made of petals, it is made of sunlight, clouds, soil, time, effort. The moment you look deeply, you see this truth everywhere. You breathe, and that breath contains the trees. You eat, and the sun is in your food. Your body is made of ancestors. Your mind is shaped by voices you've heard, seen, and remembered. Even your pain carries threads of other lives, other stories. Loneliness, in this view, is not caused by being without people. It is caused by forgetting how deeply embedded you are in everything. The illusion of being separate from life is the root of emotional isolation, and the practice of interbeing is the antidote through ideas, but through direct experience. The more you see your connection with all things, the more you begin to feel held by the world again, not as a metaphor, as reality. To start healing through interbeing, you don't need to force connection. You only need to notice. Begin with the breath. It is not yours alone. It has passed through trees, through wind, through other lungs. It came into you without effort. It will leave without your control. This breath connects you to the earth, to time, to every being who breathes. You are not inhaling in isolation. You are part of a larger exchange. The moment you realize this, even the breath becomes a reminder. You are not alone. Next, bring attention to your body. It is not a thing you own. It is a collection of gifts. Your bones carry minerals from the soil. Your blood carries water from the sky. The food you've eaten built every cell. And that food came from the labor of countless beings, farmers, animals, plants, rain. You could not exist without them. This body is not separate. It is an extension of the planet. It is shaped, sustained, and supported by life. Your emotions, too, do not appear from nowhere. They rise through conditions, past experiences, present relationships, inherited patterns. Even your grief is not yours alone. It contains echoes of ancestral sorrow, cultural wounds, global pain. When you cry, it may be your personal story, but it is also a story told across time. Others have felt this. Others are feeling it now. You are part of a shared human heart, even in suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh often reminded his students that a cloud never dies. It only becomes rain, or snow, or mist. The form changes, but the nature continues. In the same way, nothing truly disappears. People we've lost are still here, in new forms, in our gestures, in our memories, in the ways they shaped our thoughts. Even their absence teaches us something about presence. Even their silence deepens our listening. In this way, interbeing offers comfort not by denying death, but by showing that transformation is not the same as loss. This understanding changes the way you meet loneliness. You no longer try to fill it with distractions. You don't rush to find someone to fix it. Instead, you start asking different questions. What am I disconnected from right now? What part of life have I forgotten I belong to? You walk outside and notice the wind on your skin. That wind has touched trees, oceans, mountains. You remember that you are being touched by the same world that holds everyone. You are not cut off, you are woven in. Interbeing also changes the way you relate to others. When you see that everyone is made of the same elements, judgment softens, compassion grows. You stop expecting perfection because you know we all come from conditions we didn't choose. You start to listen more deeply because now you're listening not just to a person, but to the whole network of causes and effects that brought them here. Their pain becomes less foreign. Their joy becomes less distant. You begin to sense that even though you are two people, you are not truly separate. This doesn't mean you never feel lonely again. It means that loneliness becomes less threatening. It becomes something you can sit with without collapsing, because now you have tools. You know how to look into the nature of things. You know that the feeling of disconnection is often a signal not of failure, but of forgetting. And forgetting can be corrected by remembering, by breathing, by noticing, by returning to what's true. You also begin to notice how much the modern world reinforces the illusion of separateness. So much emphasis on self-image, on competition, on isolation masked as independence. But the more you practice into being, the more resistant you become to those narratives. You start to crave depth, not performance, presence, not perfection. And you begin to offer others the kind of space that comes from knowing we are all in this together. You stop needing to fix people, you simply show up with them. That showing up is more healing than any advice could ever be. Loneliness often tells you there's something wrong with you. Into being tells you there's something right with your longing. It is proof that you are still open, still capable of connection, still part of something larger. Even when you feel most alone, you are being shaped by the world. You are held by gravity, by breath, by light. The tree outside your window is not just scenery. It is part of your life. The stranger who smiled at you is not just a passerby. They are part of your moment. Every encounter, every movement is a thread in the fabric you're woven into. Practice remembering. When you eat, pause to feel the full chain of life behind your meal. When you wash your hands, feel the water's history. When you're sad, remember that others are sad with you, right now, in this same moment. Not metaphorically, but literally. When you laugh, know that joy is rippling through others at the same time. There is no such thing as your feeling happening in isolation. Every part of you is already linked. This understanding also invites responsibility, because if we are all interconnected, then your healing is never just for you. When you soften, others are affected. When you forgive, you break a chain of harm. When you speak with care, you plant seeds you may never see grow. Into being makes you powerful not through control, but through participation. You begin to live as if your presence matters, because it does, and always has. Let this truth settle now. You don't need to force connection, you only need to stop believing in separation. Let the breath remind you, let the body remind you. Let the grief and the beauty and the stillness all remind you that you are never outside of life. You are life itself, taking one of its infinite forms. You belong, even when it hurts, even when it's quiet, even when you forget. You are already home. And that is the beginning of healing, not through finding something new, but through remembering what's always been true. Connection is not something to earn, it is something to recognize. And the more you recognize it, the less room there is for loneliness to stay. Not because you chased it away, but because you finally looked through it and saw everything that's always been holding you. When the illusion of separation begins to fade, and you see that your breath, your sorrow, your joy, and your entire being are part of something much larger than yourself, another realization slowly emerges. The pain you've carried, the losses you've endured, and the fears that once felt so isolating, all of it exists not just within you, but across countless lives. And in that recognition, something starts to shift. Suffering no longer feels like a personal failure. It begins to feel like a shared human inheritance. And from that understanding, a new kind of strength arises. A kind that doesn't just seek to heal itself, but quietly asks, how can this be of benefit to others? This question is the seed of the Bodhisattva path. A path not rooted in avoidance or escape or the pursuit of individual peace, but one grounded in the vow to use one's own experience of suffering as a doorway to serve others. A bodhisattva is not a perfect being. It is someone who sees clearly that the world is full of pain and chooses to stay open, not in bitterness, but in fierce compassion. This path does not ask you to feel ready. It asks you to feel deeply. It asks you to stop hiding your pain and instead begin to honor it as the raw material for compassion. Your own story, as hard as it may be, becomes a bridge. Every emotion you've struggled with, every disappointment you've lived through, becomes something you can now recognize in others. You no longer look at someone else's sadness and feel disconnected from it. You see your own reflection. This is not just empathy, it is insight. You begin to realize that no one is alone in their experience. And the more you've suffered, the more you are able to meet others with presence, not pity. You know what silence feels like when it hurts. You know how long a single moment of kindness can last in a grieving heart. That knowledge, born from your own pain, becomes medicine. The Bodhisattva path does not romanticize suffering. It does not ask you to pretend it's noble or easy. It asks you to stop wasting it. It asks you to stop collapsing under it and start transforming it into something that serves life, not by fixing the world overnight, but by showing up where you are. If you know what it's like to feel unseen, you become the one who truly listens. If you know what it's like to be afraid, you become the one who offers steadiness. If you know what it's like to feel worthless, you become the one who reminds others of their value without needing them to prove anything. What begins as a personal burden slowly becomes a vow, not a dramatic promise, but a quiet commitment. To not let your suffering go unused, to not let it close your heart, to let it open you instead. And this vow doesn't require perfection. It does not wait until you are healed. It meets you exactly where you are and grows from there. This is not about becoming a savior. It's about becoming available, to respond instead of retreat, to offer what you can, even when it feels small. One kind word, one breath of presence, one moment of patience. These things ripple farther than you can see, and the more you act from this place, the less trapped you feel by your own story. You stop seeing your past as something that holds you back, and you begin to see it as something that shaped your capacity to care. There is no hierarchy in compassion, no ranking system for who gives more or feels deeper. Each person's journey prepares them to serve in a different way. You don't need to compare. You don't need to wait until you are free of pain to be useful. Sometimes your pain is what makes you useful, not because it defines you, but because it's what taught you to see. The Bodhisattva path is rooted in courage, the courage to stay when it would be easier to withdraw, the courage to feel when it would be easier to shut down, the courage to act even when you doubt your own strength. This is not about grand gestures, it's about presence, the willingness to sit with someone else's suffering, even when your own hasn't been resolved. The willingness to say, "Me too," not as a performance, but as a bridge. That kind of compassion doesn't need to be taught. It's already inside you. It simply needs permission. This path also demands discernment. Compassion is not codependency. It is not martyrdom. It is not self-erasure. A bodhisattva does not help others at the expense of themselves. They help from wholeness, not depletion. They learn to care without carrying, to support without controlling. They do not run towards suffering to fix it. They walk into it with eyes open, willing to bear witness, willing to respond in whatever way is needed, not whatever way earns validation. In your own life, this can begin with simple acts. Start by recognizing where your pain has taught you something useful, where your wounds have given you insight. Then, begin offering that insight, quietly, honestly, without needing to be a teacher or a guide. You are simply sharing your human experience. That alone is enough. You are not trying to be wise. You are being real. And in a world full of distraction and performance, realness is powerful. Your presence becomes a refuge, not because you always know what to say, but because you are not afraid to be there. And that steadiness, that willingness to stay, can change someone's entire day, maybe even their life. This is how suffering becomes sacred, not because it's good, but because it can be transformed. The Bodhisattva does not look away from the world's pain. They feel it fully, and still they choose to love. That love is not always soft. Sometimes it is fierce. Sometimes it means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means walking away from harm. But it always means choosing connection over indifference, presence over avoidance, integrity over comfort. This path also brings meaning. When your suffering becomes fuel for compassion, it no longer feels useless. It becomes part of something larger, part of a shared effort to reduce harm, to grow understanding, to hold space for healing in a world that often rushes past what hurts. Your story, with all its pain and complexity, becomes a contribution, not by being fixed, but by being offered. And through this offering, you heal. Not in a straight line, not in a clean way, but in a way that feels real, because you're no longer waiting to be okay before you show up. You're showing up as you are, and discovering that being seen, being useful, being present, these things heal you as much as they support others. Let this be your path, not as a burden, but as an invitation. Let your suffering soften you. Let it teach you how to stay. Let it show you what matters. And then, let it lead you toward others, not with urgency, not with pressure, but with openness, with humility, with the quiet strength that comes from knowing pain and choosing compassion anyway. This is how you turn your wounds into wisdom, not by erasing them, but by honoring them and allowing them to become the very ground from which love grows, unshakable, honest, free. When you begin to meet your own pain with compassion and let it guide you toward serving others, something deeper begins to shift. Suffering loses its tightness. It stops being a wall and becomes a path. Not because it's gone, but because it's no longer just yours. It connects you. It opens you. And within that opening, you realize you are not only capable of carrying your own wounds, you are capable of touching the pain of others and transforming it into something healing, something whole. This is where the practice of Tonglen begins, a method from Tibetan Buddhism that speaks directly to this moment in the heart. Tonglen is not a metaphor. It is not a technique meant to soothe on the surface. It is a radical practice that turns the usual way of dealing with suffering inside out. The ordinary habit is to breathe in comfort and breathe out distress. Try to keep away what's difficult and protect what feels good. Tonglen reverses this pattern. You breathe in the pain of others, and you breathe out relief. You take in what's heavy, and you send out what's healing. Not because you are trying to fix everything, but because you're willing to let your heart be the place where transformation begins. This practice does not require perfection. It requires honesty. You start with your own pain. You breathe it in, not to hold it forever, but to fully feel it, to make space for it. You breathe out the opposite, not because you're ignoring what hurts, but because you're offering yourself kindness. For example, if you are feeling abandoned, you breathe in that loneliness, that ache in your chest, and you breathe out belonging, presence, connection. You begin to train the heart not to contract around pain, but to stay open within it. As you become more familiar with your own wounds, Tonglen teaches you to expand. You start to include others, not abstractly, but specifically. You think of someone else who is hurting in the same way. Maybe a friend, maybe a stranger, maybe someone you've never met but know exists. You breathe in their pain, as if saying, "I see you," I feel this too. And you breathe out what they need: comfort, love, courage, peace. You become a bridge between suffering and ease. This is not fantasy, it is training. The breath becomes the movement through which empathy becomes embodied. You are no longer just thinking about others, you are breathing for them, feeling with them, holding a space in your own heart that does not close when difficulty arises. Tonglen doesn't require you to be fearless. It invites you to use fear. You breathe it in, you touch it, you allow it to be real. You stop pretending that being spiritual means avoiding the hard parts. You let the hard parts break you open. This openness becomes strength, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that refuses to look away, the kind that stays soft in the face of what most people run from. This practice also rewires the nervous system. It teaches the body that pain is not a threat, that you can feel deeply without being destroyed, that you can breathe through heartbreak and still send love. Over time, this changes how you respond to stress, to anger, to grief. You stop clenching, you stop escaping, you start meeting life as it is. One of the most powerful aspects of Tonglen is its refusal to turn away from what is difficult. When the world hurts, when the news feels unbearable, when people suffer in ways that overwhelm you, Tonglen gives you a way to respond. Not with helplessness, not with indifference, but with presence. You breathe in the suffering, you hold it, you breathe out your wish for healing. This may not solve the outer crisis, but it changes the inner landscape. It keeps the heart from going numb. The practice can be used in moments of deep personal trauma as well, when memories rise, when old wounds reopen, when the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. You breathe into that place, not to relive it, but to hold it fully, without shame. And you breathe out the healing you longed for then, the safety, the love, the voice that says, "I'm here and I'm not leaving." Slowly, the trauma begins to shift, not because it is erased, but because it is no longer hidden. It is witnessed, held, given space to evolve. Tonglen also disrupts the habit of self-centeredness. It doesn't make you feel guilty for having pain. It just shows you that you are not the only one, that every hurt you carry is carried by thousands of others. This connection doesn't diminish your experience. It expands it. It gives it context. It makes you less afraid, less isolated. It reminds you that pain is not a sign of failure, it's part of being alive. And when you realize that, your suffering becomes less heavy because it is shared. You can practice Tonglen anywhere, when you walk, when you wait, when you lie awake at night. You notice what is hurting in you or in someone else, and you breathe, in, out. In with the pain, out with the healing. You don't have to be perfect, you don't have to feel strong, you only have to be willing, willing to feel, willing to care, willing to let your breath carry love, even when your heart is breaking. This is not about being a hero. It is about being human, fully, awake, compassionate. Tonglen reminds you that you have something to give, not after you've healed, but through your healing, that your breath can serve, that your pain can serve, that your practice is not just for you, but for the whole world. You begin to live differently. You stop avoiding hard conversations. You listen more deeply. You stop seeing others as obstacles. You see their suffering too. And when you meet it, your response is no longer fear. It's breath. It's warmth. It's the quiet vow to not close, even now. Over time, Tonglen becomes more than a technique. It becomes a way of being. You carry the wish to relieve suffering wherever you go, not out of obligation, but out of love. Not to fix everything, but to remain part of the healing, in small ways, in real ways, moment by moment. Let this practice meet you where you are, with whatever hurts you hold, with whatever grief still lingers. You don't need to be fearless. You only need to stay, to breathe, to keep offering what you can. And what you can offer is more than you think, because within every breath is the potential to shift something, to lift something, to give someone, somewhere, just a little more space to keep going. And that, even if no one sees it, even if no one says thank you, is sacred. Because it's honest, because it's love, because it's how pain becomes something more, something whole, something that no longer isolates, but connects, heals, transforms, breath by breath, heart to heart, always beginning again. When you begin to meet pain with openness instead of fear, when you learn to breathe in suffering and breathe out relief, something inside begins to soften. You stop trying to escape the hard parts of life, and instead you hold them with care. This is the heart of Tonglen, transforming your own wounds by including others in your compassion. But even as this shift deepens, there remains a quieter pattern, one that often goes unnoticed but shapes much of our emotional world. It is the persistent hunger to be seen, to be validated, to be told we are enough. And when that need goes unmet, or when it becomes the center of our identity, it turns into a form of suffering the Buddha called tanha, thirst. Tanha is not just desire. It's the restlessness that arises when you believe something outside of you will finally complete you. In the case of emotional validation, it becomes the unending pursuit of approval, recognition, and affirmation. You feel unseen, so you seek affirmation through praise. You feel unloved, so you chase relationships that reflect value back to you. You feel uncertain about your worth, so you reach for anything likes, attention, reassurance to make the feeling go away. But no matter how much you get, it never stays. The thirst returns. This thirst is not a flaw, it is a misunderstanding of where worth comes from and what truly satisfies the heart. The problem is not that we want connection or understanding, it's that we believe emotional validation will heal the deeper wound of disconnection from ourselves. So we try to fill that absence with reflections from others. And when those reflections are withheld or disappear, we feel lost, rejected, small. The cycle begins early. Approval becomes linked to identity. You are praised, so you feel worthy. You are ignored, so you feel invisible. Over time, this connection becomes habitual. You start relying on external feedback to determine how you feel inside. But the danger here is that validation, no matter how sincere, cannot be permanent. People change, circumstances shift, attention fades. When your sense of value is attached to others' responses, you live in a constant state of tension, afraid of losing what seems to define you. This is where tanha creates suffering, not just because of the desire itself, but because of the clinging that follows, the clinging to being liked, the craving to be understood, the fear of being judged. It narrows the mind, it fuels anxiety, it distorts your sense of self, and worst of all, it distracts you from the deeper peace that comes from within, not through ego, but through clarity. The path toward freedom from this kind of thirst begins with honesty. You start noticing when you're reaching, not in shame, but in awareness. You ask, what am I hoping to receive right now? Am I needing someone to say I'm okay so I can believe it myself? That inquiry isn't meant to stop the behavior, it's meant to reveal its roots. You begin to see that behind the craving is a sense of lack. And that lack is not proof that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you've forgotten your original wholeness. Emotional validation becomes addictive when it replaces self-knowing. But validation is not the problem. The problem is when it becomes the only source of worth. When you start measuring your value by how others respond to your feelings, you may begin to question yourself when others don't agree with your pain. You may feel unseen when people don't mirror back your emotional state. But the truth is, Others cannot always meet you where you are. Not because they don't care, but because they too are trapped in their own patterns. Depending on them for your emotional balance turns your inner life into something fragile and reactive. Instead, the practice is to return to yourself, to begin learning how to hold your own emotions without needing someone else to confirm their validity. This is not isolation, it's maturity. It's the ability to say, "This hurts," and trust that the hurt is real even if no one else sees it. To feel joy and not wait for someone to agree that it's allowed. To trust your own experience without outsourcing it for approval. This kind of confidence is not loud. It's not about being right. It's about being rooted, grounded in your own presence. You stop asking the world to give you what you already are. You stop needing someone to say, "I see you," because you are seeing yourself clearly, without distortion. That clarity also brings a new kind of connection. When you are no longer chasing validation, your relationships become freer. You listen without waiting to be affirmed. You speak without needing agreement. You care without needing to be needed. And ironically, that inner freedom draws people closer because now your presence isn't hungry, it's generous. This doesn't mean you stop needing others. It means you no longer depend on their responses to feel whole. You can ask for support without begging for it. You can feel sad without demanding someone else fix it. You can share your truth without expecting a particular reaction. That's what it means to move from tanha to wisdom. On this path, you will still feel the pull. The old habits of seeking praise, approval, attention, they don't vanish overnight. But each time you notice the pull, you create a gap, a pause. And in that pause, you ask, what am I really thirsting for? Is it connection or is it confirmation? Is it love or is it validation? That question turns your attention inward. It brings the focus back to the one place where peace can grow your own heart. This shift doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you free. You start to see praise and blame, attention and absence, not as definitions, but as passing winds. They no longer shake your sense of self. They pass through, and you remain grounded. This is not numbness, it's balance. And balance is where healing takes root. Because now, your emotional world is not constantly swaying between highs and lows, between affirmation and rejection. You begin to feel stable, even in uncertainty. That stability allows you to meet others without needing anything in return. You can love without grasping. You can listen without defending. You can speak without fear of being dismissed. Over time, this changes everything. Your emotional patterns soften, your relationships deepen, your self-trust grows. You are no longer trying to earn a sense of worthiness from outside. You are embodying it, breath by breath, moment by moment. Let this be the path forward, not to reject validation, but to stop chasing it, not to deny your needs, but to understand them, not to silence your feelings, but to own them fully. The thirst for emotional affirmation becomes suffering when it controls you. But when seen clearly, it becomes a doorway, a chance to return to what never left. And what never left is this: your worth is not something you find in others' eyes. It's something you remember in silence, in presence, in the quiet strength of knowing who you are without needing anyone else to say it first. That remembering is your freedom. That remembering is what quenches the thirst, fully, gently, for good. When you stop chasing validation and begin to trust your own experience, you no longer wait for others to confirm your worth. That shift opens a quiet strength within. You realize that peace isn't found in being constantly affirmed, but in no longer needing to be. But as this inner clarity grows, you may start to notice something else. Certain feelings and thought patterns seem to return, even after insight, even after healing. The same fears, the same reactions, the same stuck emotions. It's not because you failed, it's because the mind runs on patterns, and those patterns have names, roots, and momentum. In Buddhist teachings, that momentum is called samsara. Samsara is often misunderstood as an external cycle of death and rebirth. But its deeper meaning points inward. It is the repetition of habits, the ways we react, cling, avoid, and distort reality. Not just once, but again and again. This repetition is not driven by fate or punishment. It's driven by mental habits formed over time, reinforced by craving, fear, and misunderstanding. Samsara isn't happening to you, it's happening through you. At its core, samsara is a loop, a mental and emotional habit loop that pulls you toward the familiar, even if the familiar brings suffering. You feel discomfort, you reach for distraction. You feel unworthy, you try to prove yourself. You feel hurt, you shut down or attack. Each time the pattern plays out, the brain strengthens it. The nervous system memorizes it. And the more it's repeated, the more it feels like reality. But it's not reality, it's conditioning. The mind creates stories and reacts to them as if they are facts. It fears rejection, so it avoids closeness. It fears failure, so it resists trying. It clings to control, so it resents change. These loops are not random, they're attempts to manage discomfort. But they rarely work. They only keep the wheel turning. The tragedy of samsara is not that we suffer, it's that we suffer in the same ways, over and over, without seeing why. You may find yourself in different situations, but the emotional reactions feel eerily similar. Different faces, same fear. Different job, same insecurity. Different partner, same wound. This is not Fatih's habit, and like any habit, it can be seen, understood, and transformed. Awareness is the first step. You begin to pause when a familiar feeling arises. You ask, what is this reminding me of? What pattern am I about to follow? This is not about overthinking. It's about becoming a witness. A pattern can't control you when you see it clearly. It only controls you when you react unconsciously. You also begin to question the stories that feed the loops. The mind says, I'm not good enough. And you start working harder to prove your value. The mind says, I always get left, and you become hypervigilant in relationships. But when you slow down and investigate, you realize those thoughts are not truth. They are mental habits built from past experiences, shaped by fear, not by present reality. Samsara continues. As long as craving and aversion remain unquestioned, you crave comfort, so you avoid growth. You fear discomfort, so you avoid presence. But each avoidance adds another turn to the cycle. The only way out is through, not through pushing, but through presence. You feel what arises. You don't react. You don't suppress. You watch. You name it. You breathe with it. And in that space, the habit starts to loosen. The Buddha didn't offer a way to escape life. He offered a way to understand it. Samsara isn't broken by forcing it to end. It's broken by no longer believing it blindly. You start to see that you don't need to be at war with your thoughts. You only need to stop identifying with them. You begin to live in the present instead of reacting from the past. Each time you respond differently, the cycle weakens. You feel anger, but instead of lashing out, you pause. You feel fear, but instead of retreating, you stay. You feel rejected, but instead of chasing validation, you offer yourself compassion. These small moments matter. They are the turning points, not dramatic, but real. Each one is a thread pulled from the knot. And over time, the pattern changes. Not because it disappeared, but because you no longer feed it. The energy that once fueled the loop is now used for presence. That's how transformation happens. Gradually, through awareness and choice. Not perfection, but repetition in the right direction. It's also important to understand that samsara is reinforced by the belief that something is missing, that you need something to be whole, that happiness is just one achievement or relationship or outcome away. This belief fuels the cycle of becoming, constantly trying to become something better rather than being who you are now. But the path out of suffering is not in becoming, it's in seeing. Seeing clearly the nature of the mind, seeing the emptiness of the stories, seeing the impermanence of emotions. That seeing brings peace, not because the world changes, but because your relationship to it does. You begin to trust stillness. You stop reacting to every thought as urgent. You start to rest, not in comfort, but in truth. And that truth is simple. The mind will keep offering patterns. You don't need to follow all of them. You don't need to be ruled by habit. You can observe without being entangled. This also brings humility. You realize that everyone is stuck in some version of samsara. You stop judging others for their loops. You see their fear, their grasping, their reactions not as flaws, but as habits. You start to meet them with more compassion because you recognize the same patterns in yourself. This softens the heart. It opens the door to empathy. It makes connection possible, not through shared opinions, but through shared humanity. The more you see samsara as habit, the less personal it becomes. And that depersonalization is not cold, it's freeing. You stop thinking, why am I like this? And start asking, what is this pattern doing? You move from shame to curiosity, from resistance to investigation. And that shift brings clarity, because now you are no longer trapped. You are studying the path. And every insight becomes a step out of the loop. The end of samsara is not the end of emotion, it's the end of being ruled by it. You still feel, you still care, but you are no longer spinning. You are steady, you are awake. You respond with wisdom instead of reaction. You see change as part of life, not a threat. You see discomfort as a teacher, not an enemy. You see thoughts as passing clouds, not absolute truths. This is freedom, not from life, but within it. You still walk the same road, but your steps are lighter, your choices are clearer, your heart is more open. Because now, you are not running in circles. You are walking with awareness. And that awareness is what transforms every moment, every pattern, every breath. Let this understanding settle. You don't need to escape, you need to see. Samsara loses its power not when it ends, but when you recognize it for what it is, a habit of the mind, a habit that can be changed. Gently, steadily, with presence, with care, with the quiet courage to choose differently, again and again, until the old road leads somewhere entirely new. As you begin to see your emotional life not as a punishment but as a collection of mental habits, something begins to shift. The cycles that once felt permanent start to lose their grip. You notice how quickly the mind moves into familiar reactions, not because you're broken, but because it's learned to repeat what's familiar. And yet, even as these patterns start to loosen, there is another layer that continues to shape your experience. The ongoing internal narrative. The story. The way your mind constantly explains, labels, judges, and retells your life. This story feels real, it feels solid, but it isn't. It's a construction, a stream of thoughts passing through awareness, dressed in memory and emotion. And to see that clearly, to untangle yourself from the narrative, you need to look directly, not with analysis, but with observation. This is where the practice of vipassana becomes essential. It is not about thinking more, it is about seeing more, quietly, precisely, without interference. Vipassana, often translated as insight, is the practice of observing the mind and body exactly as they are. You don't follow the thoughts. You don't believe the stories. You don't try to fix the emotions. You just sit, you breathe, you notice. And in that noticing, something extraordinary begins to happen. The story starts to fall apart not through force, but through truth. The mind tells you who you are. It says, "You're someone who always fails," or "You never get what you need," or "You're not as strong as others." These stories feel like facts because they've been repeated so often. But when you sit in stillness, when you observe your thoughts like passing clouds instead of eternal truths, you begin to see their true nature. They arise and pass. They are impermanent. They change depending on mood, environment, memory, even diet. One day you feel confident, the next day worthless, often without any external reason. This inconsistency is proof that the stories are not fixed reality. They are mental weather. Vipassana trains you to see this clearly. You don't fight the story. You watch it unfold. You see the moment it arises. You feel the body respond: tight chest, clenched jaw, shallow breath. You observe the chain reaction. A thought triggers a feeling, which triggers another thought. And instead of being swept up, you stay. You breathe. You stay anchored in awareness. Not in the content of the thought, but in the fact that it's a thought. This shift is powerful. It allows you to disidentify from the narrative. You are no longer the one who is unlovable. You are the one observing the mind saying that. You are no longer the failure. You are the witness watching that belief pass through awareness like every other thought. This space between the story and the observer is freedom. It is the beginning of a life not controlled by mental commentary. As you sit longer, you notice patterns. The mind has favorite stories. It likes to repeat what feels familiar. It often returns to identity. I am this kind of person. They always treat me this way. This never works for me. But none of these statements are stable. They are reflections of temporary mind states. You begin to see that the mind creates a self-image out of fragments, past pain, future fears, moments of doubt. And then it holds that image up as if it's the truth. But Vipassana doesn't let you hold anything. It asks you to see and release, to observe and let go, again and again. This practice also reveals how much suffering comes not from events, but from the mental commentary around those events. A single conversation turns into a story of rejection. A missed opportunity becomes a narrative of failure. But if you sit and observe, you see the event was small, the story made it large. And the mind keeps replaying it, not to harm you, but because it thinks it's protecting you. It believes that by replaying the past or predicting the future, it can stay in control. But this only creates stress. The mind is trying to solve a problem that isn't happening in the present. When you bring the attention back to now the breath, the body, the awareness, you step out of that problem-solving mode. You are no longer living in a projection. You are living in direct experience. And this experience, even when uncomfortable, is simpler, more honest. A feeling of sadness may be there, a wave of fear. But you're with the sensation itself, not the 10-layer story the mind has built on top of it. This is what it means to experience life directly. Over time, Vipassana also shows you the emptiness of identity. The idea that you are a fixed someone, a person with permanent traits, is seen for what it is, a collection of patterns, preferences, memories, and reactions. There is no single, unchanging self behind it all. There is awareness, and within that awareness, thoughts arise and pass, sensations come and go, moods shift. What you are is not the content. What you are is the capacity to observe it all. This realization does not make you indifferent. It makes you kind. Because when you stop being identified with the painful stories, you become more open to others. You see that they, too, are caught in their own narratives. They, too, are suffering because of thoughts they believe. You become more patient, more gentle, not because you've learned a moral rule, but because you've seen the truth. Everyone is trying to survive their own story. Vipassana also reveals how silence is not empty. When the mind quiets, something deeper starts to speak, not in words, but in presence. A sense of being that doesn't need to explain itself. That doesn't need to prove or defend. This beingness is who you are before the story begins. And every time you return to the breath, every time you let a thought pass without grasping, you are remembering it. This remembering doesn't erase difficulty. Life still brings challenge, loss, uncertainty. But now, those things are met from presence, not from the spinning mind. You still feel, but you are not overwhelmed. You still think, but you are not lost in thought. You still respond, but you do so with clarity. Because you are no longer trying to live from within the story, you are living from the space that sees it. That space is always available. It doesn't depend on effort, it depends on attention. Attention that is soft, honest, curious. Attention that doesn't argue with what arises but simply sees it, knows it, and lets it pass. This is the essence of Vipassana, not to add anything, but to strip away what isn't true. Not to improve the story, but to stop mistaking it for reality. Let the stories arise, let them unfold, but don't become them. Sit, watch, breathe, and each time you return to this moment, you are returning to what is real. Not the version of you the mind has created, but the awareness that has always been here, quiet, clear, whole, waiting patiently beneath every thought, every feeling, every word. Now, always now. When the stories the mind tells begin to lose their authority, you're left with something more honest. You begin to see life as it actually unfolds moment by moment, without the heavy layers of assumption and narrative. You stop being the character trapped in a tale of loss or unworthiness, and start becoming the observer of thoughts that rise and fall like waves. But even with that clarity, some moments carry a deeper pull. One of the most powerful and disorienting of these is the experience of heartbreak. Not just emotional discomfort, but the unraveling of the self that can happen when love is lost. It shakes the ground beneath you. It confuses the mind, floods the body, and tightens the heart. And even if you've sat in stillness, even if you've watched your thoughts with calm awareness, this pain can still cut through. Heartbreak reveals attachment in its most exposed form. It shows how deeply the mind clings not only to the presence of another person, but to the image of who they were, who you were with them, and who you thought you might become together. Romantic connection doesn't just involve affection or companionship. It holds projections, stories, imagined futures. So when it breaks, it doesn't feel like something ends. It feels like something inside collapses. But Buddhism doesn't turn away from this. It meets this very kind of pain head-on, not with avoidance but with wisdom. The Buddha taught that all experiences, pleasant, painful, intimate, and ordinary, are marked by three characteristics: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. Heartbreak, more than almost anything else, forces these truths into the open. The first truth is impermanence. No connection is fixed. No person stays the same. No feeling lasts forever. In romance, this is easy to forget. The early days of love feel timeless. Emotional intensity disguises the nature of change. We believe this feeling will last, that this person is the one who completes the story. But change is always moving underneath, quietly. People grow in different directions. Circumstances shift. And even if love remains, its form evolves. When attachment refuses to accept that change, suffering arises. Impermanence doesn't mean love isn't real. It means love is alive, not frozen. It means we are invited to meet others as they are, not as we wish they would remain. And when relationships end, even if not by choice, Understanding impermanence helps soften the pain. It doesn't erase the loss, but it prevents the mind from trying to live inside a moment that has already passed. The second truth is dukkha satisfactoriness, not because relationships are bad, but because nothing conditioned can offer permanent satisfaction. No matter how strong the connection, there will be misunderstandings, unmet needs, and unspoken expectations. We often look to romantic love to resolve our deepest wounds, to make us feel seen, chosen, safe. But when another person becomes the source of your inner balance, the relationship carries too much weight. So when it ends, it feels like your whole foundation is gone. This pain, when viewed through a Buddhist lens, becomes a mirror. It reflects the places where you hoped someone else would fix what was never theirs to fix. The ache is not only about the other person leaving, it's about the meaning the mind attached to them. That meaning might be security, worth, happiness, or identity. When they leave, that borrowed meaning collapses. But if you're willing to look closely, to sit with the emptiness, you begin to reclaim what you projected. You begin to see that nothing was ever missing in you, only misunderstood. The third truth is anattanot, self. In heartbreak, the sense of self is deeply disturbed. You might ask, who am I now? What do I do without them? These questions feel urgent, even desperate, because they point to something more than loss. They point to identity collapse. But this collapse can become liberation, because in truth, the self built inside a relationship is always partial. It's a version of you that only existed in that dynamic. And when it falls apart, what's left is the chance to meet yourself again, not as a role, not as a reflection, but as something much more spacious. Through vipassana, or simple mindfulness, you begin to observe how the heart responds to loss. There may be grief, longing, confusion, even anger. Each emotion rises and passes. Each sensation moves through the body, and you begin to see that none of it is permanent. Even the sharpest sorrow shifts. Even the most obsessive thoughts lose their momentum when seen with awareness. And with each moment of presence, the need to solve the pain softens. You stop trying to get rid of it. You start allowing it to be felt. This allowing is not weakness, it's courage. To feel heartbreak fully without shutting down is to honor your own capacity for love. The pain you feel is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of depth. A sign that you were open, that you cared, that you let someone in. That kind of love, even when it ends, is never wasted. It refines the heart. It teaches boundaries. It strengthens empathy. The Buddha also spoke about the chain of dependent origination, the way experiences link together to create suffering. In heartbreak, this can be seen clearly. A memory triggers a thought. That thought creates an emotion. The emotion creates craving for resolution, for return, for escape. Craving becomes clinging, clinging becomes suffering. But if at any point in that chain you can bring awareness, you interrupt the cycle. You see the thought as thought. You feel the feeling without becoming it. You breathe. And in that space, the pain is no longer controlling you. It's simply visiting. Loving kindness practice can also help, not as a way to bypass pain, but as a way to hold it. You offer phrases like, "May I be kind to myself in this," or "May I find peace even in heartbreak." You offer the same to the person you lost, not because they were perfect, but because your own peace matters. This is not about forcing forgiveness or pretending to be okay. It's about watering the seeds of care, even in the soil of loss. Over time, something quieter begins to grow, a deeper knowing. You understand that love is not ownership. That connection doesn't require permanence to be meaningful. That loss is not always a mistake, it is sometimes a door. A door into yourself, a door into a different kind of love, one that begins within and doesn't need to be filled from the outside. Romantic love may come and go, hearts may break, but compassion does not leave you, awareness does not leave you. What you cultivate through practice becomes the foundation that holds you when everything else falls, and that holding is strong not because it avoids grief, but because it allows it, fully, tenderly, without fear. Let the pain come. Let it teach. Let it move through. There is nothing wrong with you for hurting. There is nothing broken in you for missing someone. But do not let the story of loss define your worth. Do not let the end of a relationship become the end of your capacity to feel. Instead, let it deepen your vow to be present. Let it open your heart in new directions. Let it remind you that love is never gone. It just changes form. And in that new form, in that tender space after loss, you may find something unexpected. Not just survival, but strength. Not just healing, but clarity. Not just an end, but a new beginning built. Not on clinging, but on truth. Not on fantasy, but on presence. Not on fear, but on a love that is no longer afraid to let go. You've walked through a quiet forest of truth. You've breathed with suffering, sat with impermanence, and touched the parts of yourself that hurt the most, not to escape them, but to understand them. Over these hours, we explored the patterns that trap you, the stories that shape you, and the deep wisdom that can free you. From the 4 foundations of mindfulness to the power of noble silence. From letting go of self-doubt to transforming heartbreak into compassion, you've been shown not another method of escape, but a return. A return to presence, a return to what is real, a return to the part of you that was never broken to begin with. If even one sentence helped you feel less alone, or helped your breath come a little easier, let that be a seed. And if your heart feels ready, water that seed by sharing in the comments below what part of tonight's journey spoke to you most. Your voice may be the one someone else needs to hear. If you'd like to continue walking this path together, take a second now to subscribe to the channel. There's more to explore, more to soften, more to understand. This is only the beginning. Keep returning, keep remembering, keep breathing. You're not alone. You're never alone.